Do you have any other browser windows open?
I don't.
If we hear feedback, okay. Hey everyone, Merry Christmas. It's here. Let me get ready for my close up there. All right. It's Christmas Eve special 2020, and I want to thank everyone who is joining us live. And what's interesting, Mike, is this morning I woke up to some drama. You want to hear what happened this morning?
Yeah, fill me in.
So I woke up around my normal time, around 7 a.m., and I realized that I had left my morning empty because I wanted to be relaxed and comfortable for today's special. And so I willed myself back to sleep, and I slept until 9. And I haven't done that in a long time. But when I woke up at 9, my alarm clock was just blank. And the only reason I knew it was 9 o'clock was because my cell phone was handy, and the power had gone out.
Oh no.
And so I was like, oh my God, what's going on? And it was a beautiful sunny day here. There's snow on the ground, but it's sunny. And usually power outages go hand in hand with bad weather. And we don't have any bad weather. But anyway, so I went onto the power company's website through my phone, and they were reporting an outage with a couple thousand homes with an estimated repair time by noon, which is pretty fast. And so I was worried. So I went down to grab a bite to eat at a local McDonald's restaurant. And by the time I got back, the power was still not on. And so it's 1 p.m. here when I'm starting this broadcast.
Sure.
So at 12 p.m., I decided I'm going to go for a quick walk around the neighborhood because my backup plan was to use I've got this wireless MiFi device, they call it, where you can go over cellular. But 2.5 hours of broadband video streaming over that little thing would probably cost me like $100 in data. And by the time I got back from my walk, lights were on and everything.
Did you ever figure out what the cause was?
Well, ever since this spring, occasionally we've been hearing these bangs in the neighborhood, and it's the power transformers. The neighborhood all kind of went up over a couple year period, like 40 years ago.
Sure.
And now I think these machines are reaching the end of their life. And of course, they don't replace them preemptively or anything. They just wait for them to pop, and then they go out and fix it. So I think it was probably as simple as one of those things just failed. But because there's no bad weather, of course, the repairmen, wherever they are, ready to go. So we didn't have to wait. That's the killer, is when you have a bad storm and you have to wait for 2 days for your power to get fixed.
So if we lose you, I should just entertain with songs and
No, well, here's the thing: is you can entertain people with stories, but don't break out into song, because I haven't signed up for any musical licensing. And if you rip off someone else's musical licensing rights on YouTube, those people will get to put ads on the video, and they'll to get the money.
Nice, David. What are you going to spend your time talking about today? I mean, 2020 has offered so little in terms of topics for conversation, especially in the buy and sell business space.
It's been a pretty boring year, hasn't it? Well, I wanted to talk about you, because at a certain point in this past year, you actually had reached out and talked with me, saying that you were going to pivot your focus. You want to tell everyone a little bit of, first of all, Exit Oasis, a website dedicated to information about people who want to start preparing to exit their business.
Absolutely. Right.
And
yeah.
You've been doing this now for like 4 years, maybe?
3-4 years now. Started with, as businesses always do, started with a particular plan in mind. I've never talked to anybody in this space that disputes the need, the gap between what we as small business owners understand about what it takes to create a business you can sell. We all know that we have huge gaps. And I say we because, I mean, you know my story, but I did that. I built a business, thought I was, all set to live on Easy Street, and then discovered that the business I built wasn't sellable, even though I had 50 employees and growing revenue and ... So started the website designed around that topic space, with intention around curriculum build and some of those sorts of things, and then started educating myself a little bit more about the market,
Hmm.
And yeah, as you mentioned earlier this year, in fact, it was pre-COVID that I had kind of come to the conclusion that a rather substantial pivot needed to change. And then the world around me started to pivot and change. And so I described it this way. I felt like my business had been kidnapped by Schrodinger's cat, right? My business was alive and dead at the same time, which put me in great company. I mean, the small businesses that I coach, to an individual, went from exit preparedness mode to hardcore "are we going to make it" mode,
Yeah.
and then depending on industry, they've evolved past that. I mean, I suspect you've seen that all year long with folks you work with.
I've seen it in a lot of different ways, because some people actually have had their sales and go up, with the result of what has happened this past year. Other people, some people are closed, they're gone, their business is over.
Yeah.
However, you go past an empty business, that, a restaurant or something, and all the plumbing and ventilation's in there, and some of the equipment's been left behind. And you just know that if things restabilize, somebody else is going to take that on, and they're going to open a business there. But unfortunately, whoever was in there before has probably had a devastating impact personally of having to wrap up and close that business. And we're seeing this all over the place. Clearly there are winners and losers. It's interesting, because when you come out of something like this, what I'm expecting is that the businesses that survive are going to be nice and strong. They're going to have trimmed the fat they needed to trim in order to make it. Some of their competitors will be gone, so maybe their revenues will actually increase. And then, that old capital, like, for example, the restaurant with the plumbing and the ventilation in place, someone's going to get to benefit from that without having invested to create it. And so it's almost like everyone's going to start off from a better footing, maybe with less debts, fewer debts, less leverage. I don't know. It'll remain to be seen. You had decided to go out and start looking for a business to buy, didn't you?
I have. I've been, I've kind of had my head down, but my eyes open, and I've been looking at different businesses. I've been talking with buyers and sellers, which of course I've done I'm one of those guys that I think is similar to a lot of other people. I don't think I ever stop looking, right? You go by a for sale sign and you're like, oh, what's going on over there? It's just the nature of this space for me. And I've been intrigued because, in theory, this is the kind of environment that creates opportunity, right? To your illusion of the empty space with all the guts in it. It's a really weird time, though, to evaluate opportunity, right? I mean, I can simultaneously have the argument in my head: now is a great time to start or buy a restaurant. Now is an incredibly bad time to start or buy a restaurant, right? What's the answer? Who knows? Right? Who knows?
Well, it's what's interesting is just the way that there was a woman I saw being interviewed on a podcast, and she runs a food bank operation in Ontario. And believe it or not, they actually had an operations plan for a pandemic that had been written back in the 90s. And so when the pandemic hit, they got this book out, and they're like, what does it say inside? And it was basically an HR system for replacing the people who were ill, who were going to be staying at home. It was never foreseen that there'd be some kind of lockdown where people weren't allowed to move about. Sure. And that, storefronts couldn't be operating and things like that. So they had to adapt. And I think one of the interesting things that I've seen this year is just how people have adapted. So, and how the rules are different by jurisdiction. So this year, I wasn't able to travel in the summer and do the vacations I wanted to. So I spent the money on doing some home fix-ups, which a lot of people did. Yeah. And I hired a fellow to build a deck on the back of my house. And I had this idea that I was going to get a patio heater, one of those propane patio heaters, so I could enjoy the deck, deep into the fall. But of course, with so many jurisdictions allowing restaurant seating outdoors but not indoors, try to buy a patio heater this year.
Sure.
I mean, anyone who was in the restaurant business where they had to serve people outside, they were out there buying those things up like crazy.
Yeah, and it raises an interesting question for me. I mean, my sense, everything that I read, is that the pain of what we've all experienced from a business perspective is disproportionately impacting small business, right? Because what's the likelihood that how many small businesses are in the patio heater space? I can name some really large ones, large businesses that are in that space, but I sit back at times and I try to picture what's the net impact on small business, startups. At the same time that I hear people talking about starting a business, or, hey, here's my new shingle, we both know a lot of that is a function of, gee, I got laid off and I can't find a job. Here's my new business. And does that last past an opportunity to take another position? I don't know.
Well, the two, I mean, the things that I had talked about back when the lockdowns first occurred in March, that I've really seen them play out, are the people who are thinking about exiting that don't need to exit. They're totally out of the market. They're just not even trying to make their business look appealing. Maybe they're struggling to survive. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're quite comfortable, but they just realize this is not the time to be trying to play that game. And so if they have time, they don't need to retire this year or something like that, then they've withdrawn from the market. And the other thing that I'm seeing really play out is that, people are, to your point, they're out there making these low ball offers on businesses because they're thinking that the conditions of the pandemic should create an opportunity for them to be able to buy something really cheap.
Right.
And the sellers that are in the market are just not having it.
Right.
I'm seeing creative deals, but every seller out there wants the opportunity to try to get a price if things rebound, and they're not happy about it. But a lot of them are accepting some kind of terms and conditions which relate to, hey, if 2022 is as good as 2019, then this is how the deal shares more of that with me.
Sure. Yeah, that was one of the questions I wanted to ask you. I mean, do you think that anything has fundamentally changed from a buyer-seller perspective, or is it still, as it always has been, an individual decision made between a buyer and a seller? I mean, are you seeing overall trends when you talk to folks?
That's a good question, because what happened is I think the market kind of seized up for a while, when everyone was in that initial panic mode and they didn't know what was going to be happening. Early summer is when people started to thaw out and be willing to do stuff. And a lot of it was related to bankers, particularly in the States, because the banks were, a part of the relief model, doing those PPP loans, for example.
Right.
So the bankers were busy doing that stuff instead of the normal course of business. And I think a lot of them were probably happy to not be trying to do their regular deal flow during that time because they just didn't know what was going on. Right. And, I know that the lending is happening now. Deals are getting done. I've had one person in the Business Buyer Adventure Group coaching program who was supposed to have done a deal last winter that got caught up in all of the delays and ramifications of the lockdowns. And it finally just got done last month. And now the challenge that fellow faces is that the deal was supposed to have been done just before the start of the business's busy season. Now it's being done at the end of the busy season and going into the slow season.
Sure.
But he's got a good relationship with the seller. And so there might be some wiggling around that has to happen. Maybe, delaying the start of a seller note for a little bit, a couple months or something like that. But they're going to work together on that. And they have a good relationship because they've been both trying to get this deal done for almost a year. And that seller knows that he's the right buyer and he knows it's the right business. It's just turbulence. It's like river rafting. You got to get through it.
Yeah, no, that really resonates for me because, again, we see everything on the headlines. We zero in on all of that, but it still fundamentally comes down to a conversation with someone who isn't sure they're ready to sell or is sure they're ready to sell. And the technical aspects are going to be interesting. I wonder, for example, what are bankers going to do with 2020? If I go to buy a business a year or two from now, and we're doing a 3-year average of sellers' discretionary earnings, what are they going to do with 2020? Is it just a non-year, good or bad?
No, I think what's going to happen is it's going to depend whether the trend was up, down, or if it is appears to be aberrant. So if 18, 19, 21, and 22 are all kind of looking the same, I think they would just remove whatever 20 was. And if there's an uptrend, maybe and 20 was down, they might remove it. And if it was up, they might remove it. If the trend on those other years is clearly showing a story that 2020 does not support. But if 2020 is a big uptick and then 21 and 22 kind of build on that or anything like that, then I think they'll just include it.
Right.
I think it's going to depend on what. Now, I think that in 2021, 2022, it's going to be a much bigger question, what do we do with 20, than it will be by the time we get to 2023, obviously.
Yep.
Whenever I've been applying for a mortgage, I've always either been self-employed or in some kind of commissioned sales role. And, so the bank always wanted to look at my prior 2 years of earnings. And if my earnings went up, in the last year versus the year 2 years ago, they would average them. And if my earnings went down in the most recent year, they would just ignore the first year and use the second year.
Sure.
Right. Because they were always going to err on the side of conservatism,
Yep.
for making that decision to see what kind of cash flow I had available. And I wouldn't expect bankers to do anything other than be conservative and careful. That's, the way that they're supposed to operate their business.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you that that 2020 question is going to be most fuzzy this next year, right? Because I think of some of the businesses that that I have a good view behind the curtain of, and so in some cases so dependent. I work with an ice cream maker and retailer, and the retail shop was shut down. Their catering just shut down, right? No option to move forward. That internet sales picked up dramatically. Didn't cover the gap. So how do you look at that year? You go, well, I understand completely why this happened.
Yeah.
However, what does that translate into? That's
Now, lately I saw you post something on LinkedIn where someone, was an article, what do they want for their business? 7 million, of course, because there are 7 shareholders. And every once in a while, I know you're out looking at businesses to acquire, and I wonder if some of those articles that you post are related to some of the things that you're running into in the market. Are you continuing to see people that just have these outlandish expectations of what they expect you to pay for their business?
I get that question sometimes. Everything I post could have, when you go to watch to see a movie and it says based on a real story versus this is a real story. Well, I'm based on a real story. I did a post a couple of weeks ago talking about a 30x multiple. True story. I reached out on a listing that I saw. Listing. Somebody put it on Facebook for sale, and ended up having to sort through two different owners. First, the personal message, then a text, then finally a phone call, and all to get to a place where the price comes through at 30 times earnings. And I mean, what do you do with that, right? So I reached back out to him. I said, "What am I missing?
Well, some might say that's quite a good value. I think Tesla's up to 1,000 times.
That's right. Well, given the type of business it was, I mean, we're generously looking at 3 to 5, right?
Yeah.
Generously looking. And so I said, "What am I missing?" And she came back and she told me that was that's what the owners thought the intrinsic value of the business was. So of course, then I turned that into the mystical intrinsic value method, and now I've been offering that service through Exit Oasis, because it's Why not, right? I mean, if that's what we're going for as sellers, if that's what we're going for as owners, well, why not? Why can't I make a little money off that? You want $3 million for your business? Boom, that's what it's worth. That's the value I can give you. Yeah, they again, back to what we started out talking about at the beginning. The gap is huge, right? In fact, that post that you talked about, I threw it out there as a contest. What are the best reasons that you've heard for an exorbitant value? I know you contributed one, right? That others say, well, my ex-wife wants this much, my dad, right on down the line.
It really is incredible. And here's the thing that I find the most incredible is that a business owner who is the operator of the business, the manager every day they're thinking about, hey, Chris, 30 times earnings. I know. Every day the owner of that business is out there talking with their customers, understanding what their customers want, trying to meet their customers' needs, being a good business owner. Okay. And when it comes time for them to sell their business, for whatever reason, they become entirely self-motivated, self-centered, focused only on themselves and their own needs. They lose all capacity for empathy with the person on the other side of the table, which is in stark contrast to their day-to-day business, where they probably spend a lot of time thinking about what the customer might think about their offering or their price or their service. But for some reason, when it comes time to selling the business, they don't see the business as a product. And when I had my business brokerage office open, that was one of the messages I tried to get across to them. Is I would literally say things like, your business, I have to package it up. It's like putting it in a box, except it's going to be called, the buyer business profile. It's a document that tells a story. But I said, I want you to imagine this is like putting your business in a box, because it's going to go on the shelf of my business for sale store. And this now becomes my inventory.
Right.
And so, and I really came across this way of thinking about it when I was dealing with a coffee shop owner who insisted on a very high price for her business, and the earnings didn't justify it at all. And I said to her, I said, if this is the price that you want for your business, then you're going to have to implement one change. And she was like, great, what's the change? I said, you just have to implement a policy that said nobody's allowed to buy one cup of coffee. They all have to buy two. And this will double our revenues. And she said, but people who come here don't want to buy 2 cups of coffee. They want to buy one. Yep. And I said, well, that doesn't matter. Right?
Yep.
We want you to be able to sell your business for this amount you're saying, and this is the way to do it. You have to double your revenue. So you change the policy. And immediately she understood that, of course, she can't do that to her customers. Right. Yep. And so my point of view kind of translated a little bit over to her, where, none of my customers are going to pick that item off the shelf if it's crazy overpriced. And we've all walked in somewhere where we've seen something interesting that catches our eye, and we see the price, and we're like, I don't think I'm going to buy that.
Right.
And that's exactly how it is.
It is. And it goes to the problem that we have, that we don't engage this topic until way too late in the process, because I didn't suddenly get way smarter after I sold my business. Oh, now I understand how this works. I had based my idea of what the business was worth on things I had read, on things I had heard from people. I wasn't making this up. It's so easy to look at that 30X owner and go, oh, you're, so silly, ridiculous. And I get that, because it is, but I was there. I wasn't 30X there, but I was at a place where I had an unrealistic expectation of selling the business, what it was worth. And that's, again, back to what the whole point of Exit Oasis was in the first place. How do you get there? I mean, in a perfect world, well, maybe it's an imperfect world, right? We'd force owners, startup operators, people thinking about buying a business, to get a glimpse of this before they get there. Now, interesting for somebody who buys a business, right? They're kind of forced into that perspective. Mm-hmm. But they lose it then sometimes too, right? We go to buy a business. This is a fair value. This is how I can pay for it. And then 7 years later, when we go to sell that business, we've somehow lost that buyer's perspective. I don't know why that happens. I think it's self-interest. I
I have a client who he built up a business and sold it in the online space. And then he bought an underperforming online business and he built it up. And now he's getting ready to sell again. And he had spoken with me 6 months ago about what he should be asking for the business. And I had said to him, like, realistically, you're like, 150-ish kind of thing. And he wanted 225. And I'm like, here's why you're not going to get 225. And here's why you shouldn't go out there looking for 225, because, there's a certain number of people in this category he's in. I'm like, there's a certain number of people that may want to buy this. It's going to make a lot of sense to them. They're the most likely buyers. And if you come in with too great an expectation, they're just going to think that you're crazy. They're not going to want to do business with you. And so he tempered it back. He went out in the market with like a 160 price. Spoke with two people that are in the industry, they're direct competitors. One of them said that he would do it for 150. The other said for 130. Okay. Now, the person who's offering him 150 then came back and said, but I can't get the money. I need you to work with me on terms, which is also something that's perfectly expected in that space, especially, right? And so the buyer then offered him several different combinations of terms, like a half now, half later, or a monthly. And the monthly payment plan, the guy was actually willing to increase it to above 160, above the original asking price. And my client is like, so, what I'd like to do is bid the two of them against each other. And I said, you know what? Number one, people forget just how hard it is to sell a business. And you've got two people who've said they're willing to pay for your business. And I think what that does is it makes you feel like the belle of the ball. You feel like you've got all of these options, that you have the in-demand, the in-demand commodity, et cetera. And the reality is that any number of things, there's like 100 different things that could happen to each of these guys that could cause them both to withdraw their offers, and you don't have a deal. And so I said, like, the guy you're talking to the most, like, work out a deal, even if you end up getting a little bit less than you wanted, because a lot of these sellers, and he exited successfully before, so now he's probably gotten the idea that this is a normal course of business kind of thing. Whereas people who are in this space know that 80% of things that go up for sale never sell. Right. And then that's the real reality. And so sometimes you have to be a little more humble and walk softly and get the deal and wait and smile until after the check clears.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are some of the more painful conversations, right? You talk to an owner who's been listed for 2 years and they've had the thing out there at a 1.5 million valuation when it's worth 800,000, and they finally come to terms with it being worth 800,000, and then they remember that they had the first 2 or 3 buyer prospects that they had 18 months ago were in that space, and they were so disgusted by their offers they couldn't, right? They walked away from fair, solid deals, and they had to get educated by the market, and that is an incredibly expensive education.
Well, this, I think it might have even been a comment I made on one of your LinkedIn posts where I said, people in this industry are constantly consternated by these sellers who wait too long or don't do things in their business to make it more sellable, even though there's, a vast amount of information available for anyone that wants to use Google, right? You can find all kinds of information. And it's simply that, I think it's about 90% of business owners end up owning businesses, not because they are entrepreneurial capitalists who identify a need in the market, but rather because they're people who need an income. They can't get a job, or they can't keep a job, or no one will hire them, or they have an attitude problem. They can't take orders from someone or what have you. They end up in their own thing. And so they don't look at it as an asset that they're trying to polish up to maximize value for the day they exit. They see it as the vehicle that provides for them and their family, which is what it is. And it's only when something happens that causes a hiccup in that day-to-day normal plan, that they go looking for someone to help them. And all of a sudden, that now they need to be able to do something, right?
Well, I don't need to learn about this now, David, because I'm not ready to sell. I don't need to engage this topic until I'm ready to sell. Thanks for your call. That's that's how we think about this. We think this is something that happens later. And again, you know this better than I do, 3 to 5 years prep is not unreasonable to get a business to a place where it's going to not only maximize value, and I don't love that term because it feeds into that perception that we as owners have that I have value to begin with. Well, then I can maximize value, or I could just sell for this regular value. Well, most businesses are unsellable, right? And why do they get listed and not sell? Why do business brokers turn down most owners who come to them to talk? Because they're unsellable businesses. We wait and then we fail. That is the formula that most of us as small business owners use to engage selling our business. We wait and then we fail.
Well, and the other thing too is that even when businesses are cash flowing, profitable businesses, that you can see someone's going to want to buy this. I did a valuation for a business. I just finished it up last week, and this business has $5 million of revenue, and they have earnings every year. They're consistently profitable, but they have a lot of operating capital. They have an inventory requirement for non-fungible inventory, which cannot be financed. They have a little bit of leverage in their business from some other suppliers, some accounts payable and things like this. And so they have, well in excess, almost $2 million of money tied up in this business in order to support that revenue. And when you do the valuation and you look at the kind of rate of returns people demand in that industry, the value of the cash flow barely comes up to the same number as the operating capital, which means it's a business with no goodwill.
Right.
Basically, you put in this money, the money flows, and it creates a cash flow, which simply justifies the fact that you put the money in. There's no real excess earnings over and above what you would need in order to justify even coming and playing that game.
Right.
And this is tough because, again, it's a multi-decade business. It's been around for a long time. And when people start to talk about, the history of the business and the reputation of the business and how it's a well-known quantity within their sector, in their market and all this kind of thing, people are expecting that those types of story points are just going to naturally make something that is seen as being very valuable. And when you get down to brass tacks and do the numbers, and you have to explain to them how, a sale of a successful going concern in their case might yield almost what a successful liquidation could.
Right.
It's a tough conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Conversation comes to mind around that. The amount of time he's put into it, the work he's done, what he's built, incredibly impressive, right? It's a neat story. The problem is the cash machine is not kicking out what it needs. And again, it's so pragmatic, right? If I'm a buyer, I have to pay my mortgage and buy food, and I've got to pay off the debt on the loan. If the cash flow of your business doesn't help me or allow me to do those things, can you still sell your business? Of course, but you've eliminated 98% of the marketplace. Right? You've already you've shrunk so far that normal buyer, that you or me who's coming to the table, I got some money for a down payment, I'm ready to do this, I don't want to work for the man anymore. I can't do it. It ignores my basic concerns.
What method have you been employing to go look for a business? Are you doing the window shopping method of looking at what's for sale online, or are you going out and actively networking in a certain segment?
Well, again, it's a side hustle for me, so it's been a lot of the Friday evening with a beverage, looking through the listings. It's been a lot of looking at what I drive by. I'm a firm believer that I like my money to be close to me, so I tend to, this is for sale or that's for sale, or I wonder if he's getting pretty old. I wonder if he's ever thought about. So it's been more of an informal effort for me. I'm not in the here's my plan of attack and let's take over the world mode. And at the same time, I know that that consistency. One of the things I tell people I interact with who are looking to buy is you got to fall in love with the search. You got to fall in love with looking at things, because that's the only way you're going to end up finding the 1 out of 100 that makes sense for you to dig a little deeper on.
Well, and the analogy from from that Disney story, maybe it's not even a Disney story, about the kissing the frogs to find the prince.
Sure.
Like some of the people that are in the business buyer adventure buying program, what they find is when they target a specific industry, they look at one business after another, and they may not meet the criteria. But what starts to happen is they start to build this little personal database of businesses they've looked at all within similar industries, and all of a sudden they've got their own benchmarking ability.
Yep.
Where they can look at, when they see something new, they can say, well, let me compare the cost of goods sold of this new one to the other 3 I looked at. And they can start to see, well, this one's managed better than this one, and this one's doing better than this one. And so you actually start to build this intellectual capital, IP capital, in your business search. If your business is to search, you're actually becoming better at it. And one of the guests who's actually coming on at the end of the program today, he's got it down very tightly, where there's just a few pieces of data he wants to look at when he's approached by someone who wants to look at exiting, where he can determine quite quickly if it's even a business he wants to have a conversation about or not.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. And it's so basic, right? The more I do something, the better I get at it. And so if I look at several businesses, then I can start. I know people like that. I can remember really early in my career, I had an internship, and I had one of the guys at the office there. Long story short, he was looking at a set of financials for the first time. And within about 35 seconds, he said, well, we don't want to do this. Why don't we want to do this? He said, this business is going to be out of business within 3 months. And of course, then I get the financials back, and I got to read through he had done it enough that he got a sense for how things worked. He keyed in on a couple. That's what we get when we look at businesses. They can be dramatically different. Oh, I don't have financials. Ooh, right. I mean, you start to work that muscle. And what we forget is that we want to practice and build those muscles on things that aren't that important. So again, when you talk about somebody selling a business, don't go through that process for the first time and learn about it when you're trying to get your deal done, because that's when the consequence of getting it wrong are catastrophic. Compared to, hey, maybe I'm going to learn about this a little bit at a time. Maybe I'm going to take one lunch break a week and see what David C. Barnett's put up on YouTube. By the way, congratulations on the subscriber count. That I remember when you were I'm almost to 10,000, and then I looked a couple of months later, and 15,000.
Yeah, well, you talk about the effects of the lockdown and the pandemic. Is back in March, April, May, a lot of people were stuck at home, and more people were spending time online, and so the subscriber count of the channel grew quite a bit. It's pulled back now. It's now growing at a monthly rate that's similar to what it was before the lockdown.
Interesting.
But for a few months, the rate of growth increased, and I think it was because people were looking for something to do. Instead of just Friday nights looking online for business information with a beverage, people, were doing it 6 or 7 nights a week.
Yeah, fair. No, that makes a lot of sense. No, yeah. Well, good for them, because again, I'm a huge fan of the content. I think you're doing great work, and just the drip of somebody consuming that information to the point you were making, we get better at that stuff. And now it's not, I've got one shot to get this right. Now it's, I'm evolving my thinking about what a successful business to sell looks like, and what it looks like to buy a business.
Yeah, and I'll remind everyone who's watching live, feel free to put some comments in the comment side there. I know Chris, I've seen a couple there from you. If anyone has any questions for Mike, you're in Minnesota.
Well, I'm in Western Wisconsin. We're
Western Wisconsin,
bedroom community of the Twin Cities here. So,
okay, because I knew that you were close to Minneapolis. So, but you're actually on the Wisconsin side.
That's right. Yep. Yes, and to your point about the losing power, we got our first blizzard last night, so I had the joy of snow blowing this morning in sub-zero temperatures.
Well, when I went out today for my walk, when the power was out, everyone had their generators going, because if there's one thing when you live here, is that you can be guaranteed we're going to lose power 4 to 6 times a year, because we always do. And there's a 50-50 chance one of those times it will be for about 2 days, because every second year there's a power outage that lasts for 2 days. So people are very resilient. People have all kinds of things that they do. People have inverters they hook up to their car batteries so they can run their fridge. People have generators. Some people even have the fancy, automatic switch on natural gas powered ones that are hooked right to the line, so that in a zombie apocalypse they'll still be watching DVDs, at least, I guess, if once all the television stations collapse. But I think a lot of people excitedly get out there and get all their toys running, so that they, as a little test run for later on when it is really bad weather.
Right. Absolutely. Well, that's the season we're in. So yeah, it's I don't know. It's been such an intriguing year from an opportunity perspective, from a cost perspective. We can only hope 2021. I mean, it's going to be different, but maybe different for different reasons if we're lucky.
I just got an email here from Henry. Let me. Oh.
David, while you're doing that, I'm going to talk a little further about that 30x opportunity that I had. When I did the follow up with them and did the what am I missing, she got back to me and she said, well, here's what we were thinking. Why? What were you thinking? Of course, then I went into educator mode, and it was. Here's a site in that industry. Here's the value that they expect for your type of business. Again, 3 to 5 times X. But I never heard back from her, and I can only assume that it was because the family had determined what each one of them needed to have to exit. So, and I see Chris there talking about enjoying 70 degrees in Texas, and that's just mean.
Well, maybe that's the reason Elon Musk is moving to Texas.
From California, I don't know. I don't know. The trade-off there is, there's benefits and drawbacks. So, how about you? Are you what's been new on your offering? The Business Buyer Advantage. I actually just referred someone over there last week. So, you seeing a lot of interest there?
I am, actually, and look, there's Henry. Hey, Henry, how you doing? Sorry, I think you had. I forgot to put the StreamYard link in your invitation.
Right, I had a Zoom link, and then I'm confused about the time. I'm going crazy here. Anyway, is this when you wanted me? Yeah, because then I got another invite for later. I'm so confused.
Thank you for joining us. It's great to see you.
Good to see you guys.
Mike, just to answer your question.
Hey, Mike.
Hello, Henry.
Business Buyer Advantage, that particular program is doing really well. There's actually some bonuses that I've been promoting to my email list that finish tomorrow on Christmas Day, and there have been a few people that have been signing up and taking advantage of that. So, what I've always done with Business Buyer Advantage is, from time to time, I put bonuses in the program as a reason to kind of incentivize people to sign up today. But anyone who signed up before, they can just go in and take the bonuses. So it's not like people lose out if they sign up when there isn't a promotion going on.
Sure.
So that's just how I try to make it fair for everyone.
Well, she asked what I thought she should do. Who she should talk to, and I'm just such a huge believer in engaging some outside expertise, but also some thinking and talking around it. Right? Oh, I came across this. What do you guys think? boom, here's some different perspectives on it. Now I'm not a solo practitioner doing it. So, but I tell you what, David, you and Henry have got a lot to talk about. It's been a pleasure meeting with you today. I'm gonna let you go and go see what I need to do in the kitchen to help.
Awesome, Mike. Have a great day.
Take care.
So, Henry, you're in Texas as well. Chris says it's 70 degrees. How about where you live?
Well, I used to be in Texas, but I moved earlier this summer back to Florida. So I'm actually in Florida, and it's very warm here as well.
Oh, good. Well, this is what I wanted to ask you about, because last year when you came on, you were about to make an investment with your cousin in a new business franchise that you guys had signed up with. And then I listened to your podcast every once in a while, and you had interviewed your cousin. And why don't you tell everyone what industry it was in? Because clearly you guys got into something that, of course, you had to make some pivots and deal with the whole lockdown and pandemic thing, didn't you?
Yeah, no doubt. And it'll be interesting to see what the long-term effects are of the way this is, I think, changing the way people will work remotely. But yeah, we did proceed with the Office of Illusions franchise. I'm a minority partner, and I was my cousin's business coach, as you mentioned. And we actually opened the doors in June, so just in the heart of the pandemic, when things are officially shut down, we opened the doors. Now, part of the reason we were able to open and stay open is because we receive mail as considered an essential business, a place of business. So we were able to open, but it obviously significantly impacted our plans for signing new members.
Right.
So our concept, if you're familiar with any other traditional executive suites or co-working space, it's the new evolution of that. It's the combination of that. We have actual private offices, about 40 of those in different sizes, that can serve either an individual or a team, a small team. And then we have co-working spaces, drop-in spaces, conference rooms, and everything down to you just want a membership for a business address so that you can get on Google My Business. So that whole range of services. But obviously, initially, people just were afraid to come in, even for a tour.
Right.
That's gotten better, certainly in South Florida, where they're kind of ignoring the pandemic a little bit more so than other parts of the country, perhaps. We did finally do a ribbon cutting open house event with the Chamber of Commerce just 2 weeks ago. So think about that, since June till now. Of course, social distancing with masks and the whole bit. So it has impacted it significantly, but nonetheless, we're open and in business.
Well, I'm glad that you were able to open. Was your opening date in June, was that the original plan, or did you get delayed because of the lockdown?
We only got delayed about a month. Surprisingly, we thought it was going to be more significant. We had gone into it, as is always the case with any kind of business that depends then on some municipality approving permits and the whole bit. We thought, oh boy, they're shut down. But in fact, they were still operating. And because they had less to keep them busy, meaning less businesses that were opening, that didn't take as long as we were fearing. So we were only slightly delayed. Construction continued because obviously it was a dedicated crew and they took safety measures, and it was a crew that had already been working together. So that did not get impacted much, if at all. So maybe 30 days was all that was delayed.
Well, what's interesting, I was thinking about you a little while ago, earlier in the fall. There was a newspaper article in my local newspaper here where they interviewed the owners and managers of 3 different co-working spaces here in town who had said that their membership had grown because some of the companies had closed their offices and sent everyone home, and some people just were not happy about being at home and were personally taking it upon themselves to join some of these places so that they could go somewhere away from the house, have fast internet, cups of coffee and some space. Obviously, they're doing what you talk about, making sure there's adequate room around everybody and probably wearing masks and everything too. But I thought it was interesting because I know that some people are just not well suited to working from home alone.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the case.
At least around other people, don't they?
Yeah, and I think that last part is a key part. It's interesting. My partner, David, began early on in the days of the car wash business, which we sold a couple years ago now, or a year and a half ago. He worked from home and he hated it, versus I love working from home. But it's exactly the point you make. Other than it may not be physically possible for you to have a quiet space or good internet connection, most people desire and need that interaction, that networking opportunity. I don't as much because I'm more of a loner type, but most people do. And so I think that's an interesting component that we're going to see people craving and needing. Yeah.
Yeah. Chris, thanks for the comment. Business Buyer Advantage course was great. Thank you very much. That's what I aim for. I want to help people get the information they need to make sure they don't or try to avoid a bad deal anyway.
Right.
So now you're in Florida and Henry. So I got a lot of questions about Florida because,
Sure.
What is it like being there now? Because obviously the government there has said that we're not going to, impose these restrictions and things on businesses. But I'm guessing that businesses, just the, people in their own liberty of choice of what they're going to do. There's got to be some businesses that are imposing different rules, and some individuals obviously are choosing to either go out or to stay home or what have you. So how does that boil out when people and businesses are left to make their own decisions about how they want to deal with what is a real germ spreading around that could hurt some people? What is it like there now?
It's a little bit of craziness. It depends on what part of the state you're in. We moved to a much less populated area called Port St. Lucie, which is about an hour and a half north of Fort Lauderdale on the East Coast. So very small population, purposefully. If you go down into South Florida, in fact, just read an article where because of those loose rules, a lot of people this holiday season have traveled to the Miami area to party, enjoy, partake, and everything is seemingly open. And there's a lot of concerns that that's going to create another, explosion of the spread of the virus. I think you see mixed results where I'm in this part of Florida. Most people, when you go out in public, are wearing a mask. Most businesses are requiring it. But of course, it's this delicate balance that's, as a business owner, is kind of unfair because you're putting it on the business to try to enforce this. And you have people on extremes end of the scale on this. And so it's a touchy issue. When I go to my local grocery store, which I was just there last night, the Publix chain, most people were wearing masks. In fact, I think everybody in there was wearing a mask. We went up to Disney World, and certainly Disney World is an example. We went 2 weeks ago, believe it or not, mandatory. I mean, they're not playing around with it, right? Temperature check as you walk in, mandatory masks, people throughout the park monitoring that. I didn't see a single person not wearing a mask. So I think there's different levels. A lot of restaurants are doing the temperature check as that added kind of level of safety. Every restaurant, we don't go out that much, but we do go out, especially places that have outdoor seating. We feel more comfortable that way. Those places, the servers are all wearing masks. So I think people are trying, but it's a hard thing. I think it's a hard thing to put it on the business to try to enforce that, because it puts the business owner, a small business owner, in an awkward position.
Yeah, if you create a certain rule and your customers expect that that's going to be enforced, then you could end up having to, say something to an individual that might cause you to lose their business or cause them to become upset.
Right.
I totally understand. What do you think 2021 holds for you and your cousin's business, or for business in general?
Well, obviously, I've got other businesses. My frozen yogurt business in Colorado has been impacted significantly. So we just went back to having to shut down for dine-in. So that's the business I own with my partner, David Begin, in Colorado Springs. And we had to shut down indoor dining right away initially. And then, so kind of hobbled through takeout only. Then we were able to open back up. And now I think it's 2 weeks ago, we had to, the county became another red zone. And so the state mandated a closure again. So we're back to takeout only. So our sales have dropped precipitously. We're hoping that business turns around. We're actually actively selling that business, so we can chat about that. And then the other business that I'm involved with is my wife's travel consulting business. That came to a screeching halt in 2020. Yeah. So 2021, to begin to answer your question, is about beginning to rebuild those businesses, especially my wife's business. For Office Evolutions, we're confident, we'll see what happens, that, like we've already talked about, this shift to remote work, I think is going to be with us for a period of time. Yeah, I don't think it takes much forward vision to see that that's kind of happening, as you alluded to. So
Hmm.
we're hoping to benefit from that, not just from the individual business that, is no longer able to work at home or never could, but also corporate environments that are, I think we're going to see corporations saying, David, you've got this monthly stipend and you go find the solution that works best for you.
Well, it's interesting because before I was doing this full time, I worked with American Express, and I was in their corporate division, and here in Canada on the East Coast, and so I always worked from home. But up in Toronto, they actually had a large office campus in Markham, Ontario, with a couple of buildings, and the place had been, I don't know, leased at the 1980s or something. It was room for thousands of people.
Wow.
When I was there, it was only less than half full. And during my time with American Express, their lease came up, and they went looking for a new place. And my direct manager and her direct supervisor, they were people who went into the office every day. And there was, it was a building surrounded by an ocean of asphalt, as you might imagine, suburban office kind of complex kind of place. And so they went to the office every day. And the company moved from that giant office campus to occupying a few floors of a very tall, thin building closer to the city center in Toronto. And a lot of the people who used to go to work every day in the office were assigned a free parking spot only for a couple of days a week. So I remember one guy, Kirk, who was a couple levels up from me in the organization. He used to go every day, and then all of a sudden, if he wanted to go more than Tuesday and Thursday, for example, he was going to have to pay for his own parking, and it wasn't cheap.
Yeah.
And so they kind of forced it on everyone. The only people who still had their own desk where they could put their own personal belongings and things were people that handled the very sensitive information that had to do with like card numbers and all that kind of stuff for security reasons. But everyone else that was involved in every other function of the organization, they only wanted people to coming together a couple times a week for meetings, and they wanted everyone else to be at home.
Interesting. It'll be interesting, Mike, David, how long this lasts, because I think we see these cycles. I think that now, certainly during what has happened this year, large organizations have said, okay, this remote thing seems to work. Certainly the technology works. We would love to get rid of that large, huge lease that we've signed up for, or the corporate campus. But it'll be interesting if we don't come back away from it. Corporations don't come back away from it in a few years because of what they might see in the way of slip of productivity, individual productivity. It'll be interesting.
Well, and culture is a thing too. I've already heard some of the people, these big Wall Street investment firms and whatnot in New York City, saying that, their teams are working well from home, but the problem is how do you indoctrinate someone into your corporate culture when they join a team like that and they have never had a chance to be amongst the people that they're working with, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you can begin to see a slippage of and I'm sure the culture they're referring to is one where people work really long hours and really hard,
yeah,
all that kind of stuff. If people are a little more relaxed, maybe they don't hit the numbers that they want. Or
That's
something.
right. That's right. But there's also a lot of distractions, right? There's just because for most people, for most employees, we're talking about employees now, not business owners. That they're not set up for working from home on a productive basis. And maybe during the school year, if they're in school, but come summertime, it makes it a challenge. I think what we're going to see is a hybrid, and I'm already reading a lot about this, where instead of the corporate giant campus, you have satellite locations, and those, going back to my business, could end up, instead of in signing 10-year leases, end up in shared spaces, right?
Right.
Whether it's private offices or co-working, depending on your position, but allowing for smaller groups of people from that organization to come together for meetings, for leveraging each other, for the networking, for the culture of it.
Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about your coaching work, because
Sure.
when you were in Texas, you were working with people through the local SCORE office. Are you now doing that in Florida too?
I am. Yeah. I just joined the Broward County, which is not where I live. It's that Broward County is down in Fort Lauderdale, but it's a very active chapter of SCORE. So just recently joined with them. I have to limit how much I do with SCORE because I'm not retired, right? Which is the typical makeup of a SCORE mentor still today. but I've already taken over. I'll be doing one of their workshops here starting in the new year. So yes, so I do that, of course, as a volunteer basis, but then I still do coaching and consulting in my own business, of course.
Okay. And how's your podcast going? I mean, I think you've got a great podcast because
Thank you.
You get under the hood and talk about some of the details about operations and some of the things that are not glamorous. And oftentimes, it amazes me when I'm going online, when I'm on things like YouTube, and you see certain things getting all of this response and viewership, and it tends to be very fluffy stuff where it's not where the problems often are in a real small business when people have to learn to manage or navigate their way through something.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that because that's exactly one of the reasons I launched the podcast. It was about the how-to. It was about not the unicorns that we read about, and those are all great and inspirational. But it's early on in my business career, I realized, okay, I'm never going to be Apple or Steve Jobs, or those are great to learn from. But I was always challenged, how do I translate what those large, successful startups and unicorns of the business world do? How do I apply that to my little micro business? And that's always been my focus, the how-to. So very practical advice. But as you were talking with Mike earlier on this broadcast, where you've seen your numbers grow, this year I've seen phenomenal growth. So every month, with the exception now of November, December, because I skip Thanksgiving week, I don't release, and this week I don't release, so that kind of drops the numbers otherwise. But otherwise, every month has been a new record. I think we're up to 55,000 downloads per month. So it has been a record year for me as far as listenership of the podcast. And I'm, grateful for everybody who listens to it. I continue to get positive feedback. It's a lot of work, but I love it. I enjoy it. I have met so many people. I say this all the time. You and I are a good example. You've been on my show multiple times. If nothing else, the people that I've been able to meet, Mike Finger's another guy who's been on my show. That alone has been incredibly valuable, but it's been rewarding. I love having the conversations. You and I are alike. We can talk about business all day long if we are allowed to. And so it's just been great.
Well, I want to invite Adam to join us. Hey, Adam,
Hey, Adam.
How are you? Did I surprise you there? Sorry. Adam, I can't hear you. Do you have a microphone connected?
Can't hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Okay.
Okay, great. Merry Christmas, guys.
Thank you, Adam. Henry and I were just talking about systems and operations and things like this, and then you popped in. I could see you here from the control board, and I just thought it was an apropos moment because Adam, you and your mother sold your family bakery. It's a little over a year now, isn't it?
Yeah, we're going on 21 months at the end of this month, so almost 2 years.
And when I worked with you to help you sell the family bakery, I know that you were a huge proponent of implementing systems and processes, and you had really done a tremendous amount of work over how many years were you sort of implementing that kind of stuff?
So when we sold, it was 11 years and a quarter. Okay. We got serious, I would say 5 or 6 years in when we realized, hey, we want to grow. We had a lot of problems, and every little bit we grew, we had more problems. And eventually, the pain got so bad that it was, run for the hills, lock up the doors, or fix this. And we still wanted to double our business at that point. But quite frankly, the pain of owning a small business, and when you're only doing X amount in sales, it's not that profitable either, right? So you're not making a lot of money, you got a lot of pain, but you have big goals. You basically, you have to evolve and grow or die, and that was a decision that we had. And I kind of took it on my back that, we're going to figure this thing out. We're going to do it right. So we had cleanup mode for maybe at that point we only had maybe 6, 7 employees. And when we sold, we had like about 25. So, it was quite the journey. But to your point, I mean, the systems and the process are everything, right? The dream of entrepreneurship is great. But if you don't have systems in place to run your business and essentially give your staff and your team guidelines for how to run it without you, and without you always telling them what to do, that it's the only way to do it, and it's the only way to get to sustainability, and it's the only way to get to a level of profit that is anywhere commensurate with the amount of work that goes into owning a small business, which is, it's crazy. There's the quote that what is it? You quit corporate America to not work 40 hours a week, to go work 80 on your own, which is pretty much the truth.
The way that I always term it, Adam, is that when you work for yourself, you only have to work half days. It's up to you which 12 hours it's going to be.
Yes.
Henry, you earlier in your entrepreneurial career, you had a franchise pizzeria, didn't you?
I did, and then I did. I was a realtor with Remax as well in the early 2000s.
Oh wow!
Yeah, but my first business back in 1991 was a franchise of a local pizza franchise in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
And so the systems and everything that franchise offered, how formative was that for you in the way that you treated every other subsequent business that you got into?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, though, it was influential, but I think my initial background, my career as a computer programmer, is where I really developed that knowledge and need for systems, because that's what I did, right? So I knew how to develop systems, and I knew how important they were. But yes, having that was critical. I can tell you I've sold, several businesses now. The one I have for sale now, and the salon business that I sold about 4 years ago, specifically was mentioned. One of the reasons we liked your business is how well it was documented, how turnkey it was. That was a critical component to the buyers making the decision to go forward.
Well, that. When I sold my junk removal business, that basically what the buyer said to me is, he said, look, one of the big reasons I'm buying this business is because I think I can adapt your systems to the other part of my business. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the times people don't necessarily understand just how important having this documented stuff really is. Adam, the buyer for the bakery, you still know those people. You're talking with them, I would imagine, every once in a while.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we're very close. I was there yesterday, actually. We talk. Rachel, is the new operator there, and I mean, honestly, we've become like family. That the institution that we built was, it still is very important to our family, right? And it was very important for us, not only to do well on our own, but we wanted it to continue to grow outside of our ownership. So her and I mean, to the point of, we were working very closely the 6 months after. This year, even, we got together from January and February through February. We were getting together at least once a week, business planning. I've kind of, we've become very good friends, but also kind of a mentor relationship, and not in the sense of I know everything, but in the sense of, hey, I've done what you're doing before, and I've scaled from one point to another, so I can give you some guidance in what that's going to look like for you to take the next step.
And to me, this is an example of what a real successful purchase and sale of a business looks like, because you build that relationship between the buyer and the seller. And clearly, Adam, you want the business to be successful because of the family heritage that it carries, the reputation and all that kind of thing. But these people are now your tenant, right? Correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So you want them obviously to be able to afford to pay their bills.
Yeah, that's ideal. Absolutely.
I'm curious, Adam, what do you miss most about owning that business?
Oh man, I mean, a lot, and I would say that the customers, as strange as that is, I found that I had a soft spot for like hospitality in that business. I've never baked a day in my life. I still haven't. I can't. I don't know how to do anything in a kitchen. I can barely turn an oven on. But I did like the retail operations and serving people in that capacity. So, and even, I would say I stop over there because my office is only 5 minutes from the bakery. So I stop over there probably once a week, once every 2 weeks to grab a coffee. And oftentimes I see the customers, and that's the part I miss the most, certainly.
Yeah, I can see where that makes sense for you transitioning into real estate, where it's a very personal transaction. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The relationships are huge.
And so how long was it after you sold the business that you decided that perhaps getting into real estate was the thing for you?
Let's see here. Probably, I think I officially started training in October. So I was done with the bakery like July 4th. I wanted to take a few months off. In the meantime, Dave, you remember Leah, my wife, and I. We were looking for other businesses to buy. We had you do some consulting work for us. A couple of them we were excited about, but nothing was just enough to get us over the hump to take action on it. My father, Jim, is also a realtor at Remax, and he had been recruiting me since he started 5 years ago. And I was hesitant for a number of reasons. None of them ended up making any sense, because as soon as I got into it, I just loved it. I mean, a number of reasons why, but it's been just a perfect fit. So but that's why I took a few months to do some soul searching and decide. After an 11-year run, Henry, I also I was in the corporate world for 7 of those years.
Wow.
So I was doing both. So I was I was a little burnt out, and of the multitasking, and I just really wanted to be intentional about the decision.
Yeah.
And if anyone in the audience wants to just see the full story of Adam's family selling the business, there's a video on my YouTube channel called Adam P. Sells the Family Bakery, and just a quick search will call up that video from I guess about 20, maybe 18 or 20 months ago, probably.
Yep.
That video. Yeah.
Hey, David, I'll drop off here in a minute if you want me to. You can continue with Adam, or did you need me to stay on?
Well, no, Henry, if you've got someplace to go, I'll wish you a Merry Christmas and sorry for the confusion with the link.
Oh,
earlier.
no, that was my bad.
Why don't you let everyone know the URL to go to if they're interested in tuning into your podcast?
Sure. It's thehowofbusiness.com.
Thehowofbusiness.com. Thanks. And get some of those sun rays and vitamin D for me.
Thank you.
The days here are still awfully short. The
I
sun's
hear you.
setting at 4 in the afternoon. So
Thanks for having me be part of this, and I appreciate the conversation.
all right, Henry. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Henry.
Same to you guys. Bye-bye.
David, give me 1 second here. 1 second.
Yeah, sure. No problem. Adam stepped away. I'll just remind everyone, if I know over the holidays this year, there are a lot of people who would normally be traveling and stuff, and maybe they're going to be stuck at home because of the different travel restrictions and rules that have been imposed in different places. I want to remind everyone that the holiday chat special that I do every year starts tomorrow. And so if people are on my email list, which you can join over at davidcbarnett.com or get to it directly at davidcbarnettlist.com, starting tomorrow for 9 days in a row, every day you'll get an email with a new link to one of the holiday chat specials. These are 1-hour consulting calls that people have paid for. And so people have paid to spend time with me to talk about what is on their agenda. And so it's like a real call you get to listen in on. And if you like them, there's a playlist on the YouTube channel of all the ones from the past 3 years, because this is the 4th year that I've done this promotion. So it's been quite popular. Adam, I'm interested in how you decided to, you took a break, you looked at some other businesses, you eventually got into real estate. What is very interesting about your story, of course, is that you're much younger than most people that I've ever worked with to exit a business. Mm-hmm. But that is part and parcel with the fact that you were partners with your mom, right?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
And what did she do? Was it more traditional, kind of go into retirement from the exit?
Correct. Yeah. She's in retirement. She was, working part-time just to keep herself busy, but obviously with the COVID situation, she was working actually at a restaurant, just helping in the kitchen a few days a week, but she stepped back from that. She's still, very active. She definitely wants to continue to do something. But hopefully next summer she'll, jump back into something like that.
And so, getting into real estate just before 2020, obviously we know that real estate prices have gone up in a lot of places. Did you see some of that benefit in the Milwaukee area?
Oh yeah. I mean, quite frankly, we're in a real estate boom. It's unbelievable. It was, and it's interesting, right? Because you have the COVID situation. So many businesses have really suffered from that. And we had the polar opposite. We went into COVID already with about 1/3 of the inventory that we needed for a balanced market.
Wow.
And Yeah, and that's Milwaukee, but that's many places. I mean, I would say the average number is probably about half the inventory across the country that was required. So it's interesting. COVID hits, stay-at-home order. Well, we were deemed as essential services in real estate, and the market just boomed. So we never stopped and actually got busier than what we were pre-COVID. But it actually makes sense. I mean, home has become more important to people than it was pre-COVID, right? And even myself, you're at home more. So it's important to love where you live, but also where you work, because now we're working from home, or so many people are that it kind of cranked up the heat, and then people started thinking, hey, I could use this if I'm going to be home more. I'd like a little bit more space. I'd like more of a backyard, and that just added fuel to the fire of already a booming market.
We hear a lot about what's happened in places like New York City, where people are leaving, apartment dwellers in particular are leaving the center of the city, trying to find more space. Here in Canada, same thing is happening. A lot of people live in these little condos in downtown Toronto. They're trying to get out into suburban areas, or even moving here, to the East Coast, because if they are having to work from home, they can do it from here too. I mean, as long as they get an internet connection. Is that same sort of story playing out for you there?
Not really. I mean, and we are not a massive metropolis. I think the greater Milwaukee area has about 2 million people, I believe. The city itself is about 600,000. So you're only, it only takes you, I don't know, 10 minutes in a car, basically, from the city center to be out in the suburbs. So it is, I think we're a little less sensitive to that. I think we're definitely less sensitive. And it's interesting because we sold quite a few homes, right, that are in the city just outside of downtown, and they were flying too. And it was a matter of people who were renting in smaller apartment buildings. Yeah. It was like, hey, if they were going to buy a year from now or 2 years, that just created more urgency for them to buy that house now. So there are more vacancies in apartments, and I know from New York that's a huge trend, right? Yeah. And we do see a little bit of that here too, but not even. I mean, it's nowhere close to what they're seeing in New York.
You mentioned that you had looked at a couple of businesses, and I recall talking with you about one. Are you still have your eye out for something to buy?
Yes, we do. And we're actually very close to signing on the dotted line. It's confidential, as I can't give you all the details, but certainly we're supposed to close on a business by the end of the year here.
Wow.
Yes. So it's my business partner and I, and obviously my wife, Leah, will be involved at some point starting in 2021. It's in the real estate sphere. So I kind of, I knew right away 3 months in March, I'm like, I found my life's work. I had told you before, I work for Milwaukee Power Tools, a large worldwide manufacturer of power tools and accessories. And then I work for Wacker Neuson, a German company who manufactures skid steers and excavators and wheel loaders. And the side business, the one that my mother and I ended up selling, just kind of was growing on the side until finally I hit a fork in the road, get serious about one or the other. And I decided to get serious about entrepreneurship. Knowing that, I'm not passionate about baking. I'm really not even like a food service person. So as much as I like the retail and that cafe hospitality portion, I knew I wanted something more business, financial, deal related, right? So as soon as I got into real estate, I'm like, this is it. I'm where I want to be. So all of the other previous searches at that point just kind of stopped because I'm like, I'm looking for something in this space.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask if it was a business that had any kind of hiccup or change because of the pandemic, and has this business been improved or benefited from the same forces that have helped realtors?
Yes, it's absolutely benefited. I'm a fairly conservative guy, right? So I look at what's happening now, and we know it's not sustainable. Right. We know that we're nowhere near. If you look at all the number crunching and kind of where we're at in this market, it's nothing like it was in 2008, but it's still unsustainable. This year in Metro Milwaukee, home prices rose between 6 to 9%. Next year, they're forecasted to raise another 8%. It's simply not going to happen forever, right? Yeah. But you have this odd situation where, builders aren't putting up enough homes, but to build a home today is, quite frankly, outrageously expensive.
Okay, so let's talk about lumber, because where I live in lumber country. Basically,
Sure.
trees grow everywhere here, and there's lumber mills all over the place. And when we went into the pandemic lockdown and everything, Canada and the U.S. had a tariff thing going on where they were imposing tariffs on Canadian lumber, and because of the tariff, many of the mills had stopped operating. And so not only was there a limit to how much lumber was available, the whole value chain, production chain had been throttled to some degree. And when, the whole building home improvement thing kind of was evident here, I hired a guy to build my deck. I think I hired Phil in April and did the drawings and everything. And because of one of the beams being very long, I had to get an engineer stamp. So there were some delays, but by the time he got started, it was summertime, and the building permit was for the deck and a fence, privacy fence. Well, he built the deck, and then by the time he got to ordering the lumber for the fence, we could not buy the lumber for the fence. It wasn't available.
Sure.
And so the building permit is still in my front window, because I guess he's going to come and do it in the spring. Like, we just completely ran out of lumber. Hey, Mark Mooney just joined. And hey, Mark.
Hey,
Mark
guys.
With Natural Born Coaches, but Mark used to own a real estate brokerage. And so I'm just talking with Adam about real estate in Milwaukee, Mark, and he was talking about how prices obviously have gone up there, and how there's a shortage, and the new homes are very expensive. How did builders react initially in the lockdown? Did some of them maybe pull back on their plans for the summer, Adam? Be worried about what
so it's interesting. We were fully embedded in this situation. So my wife and I actually were in the process of building a home. So we got to see both ends of this, and the builders, so we ended up after we signed the contract, we ended up pulling out of it. And there were a number of reasons, but one of them was by the time we had signed, the Metro Milwaukee Builders Association, the MBA, had added a clause to all their contracts that any cost increase that they took on post-contract due to COVID would be passed along to the buyer. And we were already paying a huge premium. I would say minimum 30% over an existing home. And it just made us very uncomfortable. I'm like, who knows what this is going to be? There was also a clause in there. It could take them an extra 6 months to build the home. And for us, it was just like, enough is enough. So we ended up finding something existing, which was very fortuitous, because we got to stay right in the area that we wanted. But yeah, and so builders have been booming this year. But if you look at the economics of building a home now, it is outrageous, the difference versus an existing home. And that has only fueled the existing home market even more, because, you can get a home that was built 3 or 4 years ago. There's still not enough of them out there, but you might save 40% versus what it would cost you to build today with the builder. I mean, for basically the same product.
Well, I have a buddy who works in the poured concrete construction field, and he does a lot of foundations, but he also will do high-rise buildings, concrete floors, for residential and commercial construction. And they were finishing up at the just over the winter. They were finishing up the concrete work on a big, I think it's 6-story building, which was residential on top, commercial on the main floor.
Yeah, sure.
And there were plans for a sister building right beside it. And the developers panicked and didn't know what COVID was going to mean. So they told him to stop. And he disassembled all of his frames and all the forms and everything. and they probably wish they hadn't, because the first building's full and they already apparently leased out half the second one, but they have to wait now until spring before they can start to dig into the ground and get the foundation going. What we're benefiting from here is not just people who want to move from an apartment to a house, but we're getting, Mark, you've probably seen this too, where all these people from Ontario and Montreal and big urban centers are moving down here to get away from the problems with the pandemic.
They can't escape politicians, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's true.
they're not any smarter in New Brunswick than Ontario's. They're
As long as they're smarter than the U.S. politicians, okay, guys, we're in a different realm of reality.
Well, so what, you have holidays planned and everything, Adam? Are you going to be doing any traveling, or are you all just staying
It's local? Yeah, we are. We're still kind of, I would say, honoring the lockdown as much as we can, and we're just trying to be careful, and I don't know, nobody knows what the right answer is. I don't other than wearing a mask, but I think it's just good practice. I don't really fault anyone for however they feel about this, but we've just been a little bit more conservative.
Yeah, myself as well. My dad's 82, so I'm cognizant of, if I'm going to be spending any time with him, I need to be careful. What?
Correct.
What I
Yeah,
do.
we have the same situation. Leah's parents are close to us, so we're like, if it's one thing to put ourselves in risk, but then if we pass it to them, you just, the ball just continues to ravel. You know what I mean?
When I popped on here, I first saw Adam Purcell, which shows what 2020 is doing to us, and I'm like, no, it's not Purcell.
Like that.
the way your brain interprets.
Well, I went to sell a couch last year on Kijiji, which was basically our Canadian Craigslist, and I kept spelling coach for sale, because I spell coach so many times around a day. I'm like, I can't spell couch anymore. So it's the same way with Purcell.
Yeah, Mark, if I was Adam Purcell, I would be on a yacht right now doing this.
Hermosa Beach Joe says, great show, David. Thanks for tuning in live. And M. Sway says, good diversity of guests. I'm guessing of guests. Thanks very much. I always have fun. Last year was the first time I did the show, and it was such a great time. For me personally, my kids are always with my ex on Christmas Eve. So I was like, what am I going to do today? Because everything shuts down. Nobody's working. I haven't gotten any work emails since, about 11 a.m. Everyone's kind of packed it in over noon hour, and they're gone home, and that's great. And my hope was always to create a little bit of content that people could listen to, maybe while they're doing car trips or whatever, to visit relatives. That's not happening as much this year, but hopefully people who have to stay home, who aren't able to see family and stuff, they can, watch something like this or listen in on the podcast stream, and give us a little bit of distraction, hopefully, for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, awesome. Mark, what's going on with you? How is the coach? And for those who don't know, Mark Mooney is with Natural Born Coaches. You run a bunch of coaching programs for people in the coaching industry to help them work on their business versus so much, I think a lot of stuff out there for people in coaching is about how to be a better coach. You talk a lot about, hey, pay attention to the business. What did 2020 bring for people in your industry? Because obviously there was some upset and change that would have happened with the effects of the pandemic.
Oh, boys. Just like any industry, like Adam with real estate, and I know you too with business brokerage and different things, Dave, it's definitely affected things. There's no way around it, whether you think COVID's the scariest thing ever, or if, there's people think it's the flu, wherever we are, it's going to affect business regardless. So with the coaching world, that's interesting. I found 2020 to be, my business is up, knock on wood, so I'm happy with that. It was an interesting year because besides COVID, we dealt with the race protests, racial stuff. I know, Adam, you guys had a lot of stuff going on in Wisconsin with that too. Then you had the U.S. presidential election, and it seemed like, I don't know what was in the water this year or whatever, but it was tougher to get your message out amongst all that, like through the thickets, because there are times when I'd scroll down my social media feeds, and out of 10 posts, 8 of them would be over whatever controversy of the day. I was lucky. I think what helped me and I know you're like this too, Dave, with your business, is I was able to keep my head screwed on tight because I have certain things I do religiously. I've been doing daily emails to my list since April 2016. Have never missed a day in 1,700 plus days. Knock on wood again. But I'm like, hey, daily emails going out. My podcast, kept going out, and just all these other things. So I made a habit not to consume too much media and also social media. But if you're sitting there watching CNN 24/7, like, how could you not want to jump off a bridge after a few hours of that? I mean, it's pretty bad. So
you got to stay away from it.
You do. And I'm going to hear if the world's going to end. I mean, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to hear it. What I do every morning is like a pub crawl, except I call it a news crawl. I hit probably 10 news sites I like to check in on both sides of the aisle to see what's going on, and I get the heck out of there. So that's my version of a pub crawl. Just bang while I'm eating my bagel, and then I'm done.
Smart. It's what amazes me is that there have been many studies done about advertising, and what most people will say if they're ever asked the question, does advertising affect people, is almost everyone will say, well, it doesn't affect me, but it affects other people, right? And people really believe that they are far more in control of their opinions and feelings and ideas than I think they really are. Like, if you are plugged in nonstop to, negative, sad, worrisome messages all the time, then this is going to start to color the way you think. I don't do a news pub crawl on purpose. I limit my news intake to a printed daily newspaper that's dropped off on my front step, just like it has been for years. And I've written about this a lot in the emails that I send out too. One of the things I love about the printed newspaper is the printed newspaper has no idea what I'm interested in or how to reorganize itself to give me what I want, and which is what social media does, right? They have an algorithm. They keep feeding you the same stuff that you are interested in. You end up in this echo chamber where you're always exposed to the same stuff over and over, and you develop this idea that other people are seeing the same thing. And so then it's a shock when someone else has a different opinion. But what you don't realize is their social media feed is completely different than yours. They're seeing all kinds of different stuff. And this is what I like about printed newspapers, because it's all laid out there. The editor or whomever is just trying to put all the stuff and make it fit around the advertisements or what have you. And so there are things that I will see and read that I'm not really interested in at all, but the headline might catch my attention. And you get to see different stuff that you might not normally be exposed to if you are just getting your news from social media. And an increasingly large number of people are just getting their news based on what their friends are sharing, on Facebook or Twitter or what have you.
Yeah, and with the newspaper, you're not getting all the dumpster fire in the comments section that you see online, right? So people, not saying that's not biased, because I think every paper probably does have some sort of bias, but you're not seeing what some kook that lives 1,000 miles away is like, cursing you out and, ad hominem attacks and everything else. So I think it's definitely a little more measured with the paper. But a good example of the power of the media, I got my winter tires put on my vehicle because, of course, Canada, recently, about a month ago or so, and I was sitting inside my garage, and they're A1. I love them. They're perfect. My only complaint with them is they have the TV blaring in the waiting room. You can't escape it, and it's turned to the news where it's just this rotating nonstop. You'd swear it like just, I don't know, if I had $1 every time I heard COVID in that 2-hour appointment, I'd be very, very rich. And by the time I left there that day, I was off a little bit. Like, man, and I realized, I'm like, yeah, because I just sat there for 2 hours and had to soak in the negative news nonstop. So going forward, I'm going to bring these and listen to a good podcast or, audio book and just crank it up to keep it out of my ears. But it's little things like that you don't think of, or people falling asleep with the TV on too, which is very dangerous because that's sinking into your mind before you go to sleep.
Yeah, directly into your subconscious. Mark, all of my books are available on Audible.
Yeah. I listen to them before bed every night, Dave. That's usually my bedtime routine.
Hey, David, before I jump off, Mark, I have a comment for you. So, I, like all of us, I follow as many thought leaders as I can. I try to read a lot of articles. On the coaching thing, it's interesting. It was maybe a week or two ago. I read it was I think it was an Inc. article, like the top 3 things that determine whether or not a coach is going to be successful. And the article, it was, I never heard this before. It made total sense though. The point was the number one factor in whether or not a student will be successful in working with a coach is whether they have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. And it was such a katana shot in my brain because, you know, I consider myself like a growth person, and I tell myself that every morning I can get better and all these things. But it's interesting, if you, even for myself, I'm like, you know what, every time I can't get over a problem, it's myself in my head saying, I'll never get better at this, and I can't get better at this. So it was just like really captivating to me, you know, of that. Because it's like 60% of the areas I have the growth mindset, 40 I have this fixed mindset. I got to fix that, and if this is ever going to be effective. So anyways, I wanted to share that with you because it's been in the back of my mind recently.
Well, that's all Carol Dweck with her book. And she literally wrote the book of mindset because it's called Mindset. And that's one of probably my top 10 books when I'm recommending books that coaches and other people should read is Carol Dweck's book. So I agree totally.
I've read that book, and I've got this deck of affirmation cards that I go through every day, and I read them out loud. And one of them is I have a growth mindset, because I think it's something that you have to constantly remind yourself of. And what I like to tell my kids is that if you can learn how to read, then you can do anything you want. It's just a matter of then getting the right information and absorbing and learning and figuring out what you want to do. And, you know, I try to reinforce that with the kids, that there are no limits. It's just now you got to find the knowledge you need, and maybe you have to practice and develop some real skills in one way or another, but there's no limits to what someone can do. Adam, thanks a lot for joining us today. It was great to catch up and see you again.
Thanks, guys. Merry Christmas. Dave, we'll talk in the new year about the deal going on.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Bye, guys.
All right. And Chris gave a comment saying, happy holidays, guys. Happy holidays to you, Chris. I'm having a lot of fun here with StreamYard. Of course, for people who are regular viewers of the YouTube channel, they will know that I've been practicing my StreamYard skills, working up to this today to make sure that it comes off without a hitch.
Good stuff. That's our biggest fear, right? At the end of the day, it's not the end of the world if something did happen, but on this, whether it be webinar or whatever, I'm like, please, tech gods, be on our side today. Yeah.
Well, did you lose power earlier today?
Well, I've been on the road today. I was going from Moncton to Fredericton, so I don't know.
Okay, well, I lost power here in the West End, so it came on just in time. So
good stuff.
We're all good. And then awesome. Henry, thanks for sharing. Adam, great stuff. Henry Lopez, thank you, Henry.
Hey, Henry.
I have okay. So here's the thing that I want to ask you about. And earlier today, when Mike Finger was on, we alluded to this, is that in a period of economic trouble, a lot of people end up losing their work positions. A lot of people will end up turning to entrepreneurship. Coaching is often something that people can get into as a solopreneur kind of pursuit. Have you seen an influx of people curious or wanting to learn more about the coaching industry since unemployment started to increase with all of the economic catastrophe of this year?
Yeah, no doubt about it. Even if 2020 was a quote normal year with no COVID and none of that stuff, I'm sure coaching's been just hockey stick growth, or at least consistent growth since 2014 when I started. It seemed like there were a lot of coaches then. Way more now, and definitely with 2020 with the lockdowns, everything else. What's happened too is, I think, believe it or not, some people didn't know what Zoom was before. So one of my friends who you happen to know, who's a lawyer, back in the spring said, "Hey, there's a really cool tool you should check out. It's a video platform. It's called Zoom. Have you heard of it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I've been living on there for years, but thanks." But we're in a bubble online. We think everybody's heard of Zoom and they know it. And he hadn't. And so many other people are really getting used to working from home. They're like, wow, maybe this is good to transition over. So coaching is booming. The recent coaching survey from ICF was just released, and the numbers that they gave seem low, but they're only looking probably at certified coaches and stuff. It's way more. I mean, my group alone is Facebook group is 20,000. Now, some of them are aspiring coaches, but the numbers are huge.
Yeah. And so, when you're working with coaches, you have some different programs and things. Have you seen talk about your Facebook group, because how many people are you up to now?
We're almost to 20,000. We're at, last I checked,
That's
19,
incredible to me.
yeah, 19,500 and change or something like that. So January we'll hit 20,000. Yeah.
And so these are all just people who are either they're coaches, they're interested about coaching, or they just want to be part of a discussion and talking about the topic.
Yeah. I mean, we're pretty tight on who we let in, but I'm sure there's some people who are fake accounts or bots that sneak through. I mean, that's inevitable, but overall we're pretty tight on the whole admission process. And yeah, the group started September 2015, so it just passed 5 years. I had a really good start with it because it got to 500 really quickly, because I'd had my name out there through the podcast and other stuff.
Right.
But once it hit 1,000, just seemed to really steamroll. It just got going, and Facebook started suggesting the group to a lot of other people, and here we are now with about 20,000. So yeah, it's been going really well.
So now this is a channel about business stuff. And so in that world of coaching, what do you think, what proportion of the world of coaching is oriented around business stuff versus the life coaching? Because I know there's all kinds of coaching. I interviewed someone a couple of weeks ago for the Business Buyer Adventure Group who had who was a sales coach, but previously had a career as a dating coach. And so there's diet coaches, there's coaches from the world of physical activity and sports, the coaches that I've always known about, and then there's life coaches. What is a life coach?
Well, I don't want to pick on.
I heard you sigh.
My life coaching.
What does that mean?
Did that come through? I don't want to pick on life coaches, because I think that their heart's in the right place, and there's a lot of great life coaches out there. It is difficult if you're starting out brand new and you say, "Hey, I'm going to be a life coach," and a lot of those types of coaches say, "I want to help people, achieve happiness, their ideal relationships, make more money, be more spiritual, healthier," and they're trying to cram a lot in there, and it can be tough. That's very general. So my friend Carl Bryan, he's always him and I have talked about this. He's in the business coaching world, where he has a platform that helps business coaches, or a service. He's always trying to lure life coaches into more of the business coaching side, because it is an easier sell, in terms of showing ROI, everything else. Or at the very least, if you do something, another friend of mine, Tom Matson, always says, if you do something, tack on to the end for entrepreneurs. So instead of helping people achieve, if it's a stronger marriage or something like that, it's specifically for high earning 6-7 figure entrepreneurs who are going to pay a fortune if they get divorced, if their relationships go with it. So not saying that you can't be a successful coach as a life coach, or if you're not involved with the business side of things, but it does make it easier if you can point out that ROI, which comes from business coaching, basically.
The for entrepreneur tag onto almost anything, as you say, makes a lot of sense to me, because I think that there really are two different worlds. And if you run a business, I run a business, we hang out sometimes, we meet up and go have beer and stuff like that. But what I find is that when there's some sort of crisis in business, or you need to get something done for a client, and you sometimes will invade your personal social space time with the business work that has to get done. And if you're, talking with other people who own their own business, they understand that. When you talk with people who are employees, they often don't get that. They're so far divorced from the world of having to do whatever it takes to make sure that things stay on the rails. I can really see that, because, anything to do with life, if you're running your own business, it's different than how the vast majority of people get to live.
Yeah, and you have to get your foot in the door as a coach. So if you are a business coach, every coach is a life coach in a way, because if you're a business coach, there's other things that are going to spill in there from your client with their own personal life and health and other things like that. So I'm not suggesting you're only talking, numbers and business and so on. You're going to have to get them through the door, and then you could use some other tools that are in your toolbox, so to speak. But if you don't get them through the door, you're not going to get that opportunity.
Yeah. I'd just like to remind everyone, whether you're watching live or you're watching the replay, it really helps a lot if you click the thumbs up button on YouTube. It helps the algorithm tremendously. And if you're fairly new to the channel, if you're interested in more of the background of some of the people that I'm having on today, and some of the stuff that we might be talking about, I'll remind everyone that if you go to my YouTube channel main page, there are playlists. I've got it sorted by several different topics. And you can actually watch a playlist for people that want to buy a business, a playlist for people that want to sell a business. I think there's about 8 or 9 different playlists that I have set up. It's an easy way for people to kind of consume the content and sort of catch up on stuff. Mark, you started your podcast was before I started my YouTube channel, didn't you?
November 2014.
Okay, so I started making YouTube videos in 2014 as well. So it was around the same time. But you had gone whole hog initially. You were doing it daily, correct?
Yeah, then once I got out of the loony bin, I scaled it back. Yeah, it was a little crazy. So in a nutshell, when I started my coaching business 2014, but then the podcast later that year, I learned podcasting with John Lee Dumas, his community, Podcasters Paradise. John's a host of Entrepreneur on Fire, EO Fire. And of course, John was doing daily. He was kind of the godfather of coaching, even though he'd only been at it, podcasting, only been at it for a couple of years, but he was doing a daily show. So I'm like, you know what? John could do it. I'm going to do a daily show. And so for the first 300 episodes of Natural Born Coaches, it was a daily show. And I was editing it myself because my twin brother, Matt, now handles it. He's been started his podcast editing business in 2015. I very gladly handed it over at that point. But the first 300 episodes, it was me doing it. I'd rather get a root canal. I hate editing. It's just, it's not my thing. I don't want to listen to my same jokes. I was already there. I said the lame jokes. I've heard the interviews. So I'm the type, when I do an interview, it's in the can. I don't want to hear it again. It's just going off to the next one. So that's how the numbers jumped up so quick. So people look at me now and they're like, oh, geez, you got 700 or almost 700 episodes of your podcast. Yeah, we got to the first 300 or so really quickly. I kind of went backwards. Some people start one a week and then they go to maybe 3 times a week. Then maybe they work them up to daily. I was at daily, so 7 times a week, then 5 times a week, then 3 times a week. And then I've settled at the once a week, which is much more manageable. But I'm basically putting more of my effort now into the daily emails. That's my daily focus if I'm doing something daily.
Yeah, cool. I just noticed that Santa Claus came into the studio. So I'm going to let Santa Claus in. Hey, how you doing, Rick? Nice hat.
Hey, Rick.
Hey, Mark. Hey, Dave. How you guys doing?
We're doing good.
Good stuff.
We're just talking about Mark, about how he grew his podcast audience, and really with the podcast, the Facebook group, etc. You grew that to grow your coaching business, but it has almost become a media business at the same time because so many people are tuning into your platforms under your control that you are actually able to monetize that. I know you did an episode of your own show recently about how you do a joint venture with some providers, which really you call it a joint venture, but in my mind, it's a sponsorship model, is it not?
Well, I got into this with someone else. We were splitting hairs over the whole definition of a joint venture. I view it as a joint venture, but it's potato. Basically, I do flat fee joint ventures. So let's say, Dave, you have something that's of interest for coaches. I agree to promote it for a week, heavily, just hammer the heck out of it. And you pay X amount and then you keep 100% of sales, with it. And I did a lot of it. I did probably 30 of those in 2020. I did too many. Now, they weren't all 1 week. Some were, I do a mini one, 3 days or so, which was great for revenue. But to be honest, it also took away a little bit of me promoting my own stuff because I have to promote the partners so heavily. So 2021, I'm trying to find that balance, between the two.
So then tell me, how much should I be charging Rick for this scrolling banner that goes across the bottom?
300, I would say, is fair.
$300? Yeah, okay. So maybe we could convert that to growler fills. So
yeah, or maybe free lunches for life or something, dinners at one of the restaurants. Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. The internet's going to call you again, Rick.
Well, I mean, I don't want to stick around too long here and interrupt your guys' stuff. I can scoot out here and,
Well, it was good to see you, Mark. Happy holidays, and I'm sure we'll chat again soon.
Yeah, same to you guys. I know you have a good chat. I will say normally I wouldn't do a call on Christmas Eve, but now this is a little tradition where I did this last year with you guys. So I said, no, I got to do Dave's. But if it was Joe Blow saying, hey, you want to hop on Christmas Eve? I'd be like, piss off, No.
Well, I'm glad that you chose to come and
Yeah.
join us. It's always good to see you.
Awesome. Have a good one, guys. Merry Christmas, Dave, Rick, everyone watching. Have a good one.
All right. We'll see you later.
Bye-bye.
So, Rick, you got all your Christmas shopping done?
Yeah, I finished it this morning.
Oh, really? Did you go out to the stores? Were they busy?
No, well, I had to do a couple things that there were just small little things to put together. The stores aren't too bad, but they weren't busy even leading up to the holidays. We were out on Monday and Wednesday. Well, my wife was out yesterday, so I don't know. I didn't ask her what it was like, but Monday and Tuesday I was out, and they're not busy at all compared to previous years.
Well, and for those of you guys who don't know the geography, Rick lives just outside the city that I live in, Moncton, New Brunswick. It's kind of like the center of three provinces, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Prince Edward Island. And as the center point, it's like a shopping hub. And right now, as we speak, there are border controls. So, all the holiday shoppers from Prince Edward Island and northern Nova Scotia, they're not here. They have to go do their shopping at home. And so I would imagine it's not the best of times for some of the retailers here. They're not seeing the same volume of customers.
No, and they're limited too, right? So depending on their square footage, they can only have so many people in at a time. So in a store like Bass Pro Shops, there's only allowed 50 people in the store at a time. And so you're seeing that lineup outside. Bass Pro, I didn't see the lineups, but I did see it at the grocery stores and some of the other retailers in the malls. And I mean, I remember going back probably 20 years, if you want to do your shopping at the last minute, you did it on Mondays and Tuesdays. And it felt so weird. And then not the last week of Christmas. The last week of Christmas, it was busy every day, and it felt so weird being in the mall. Even at Costco Monday, it felt like a September.
Just a regular run-of-the-mill day.
Yeah, and Costco's busy. Don't get me wrong, but if you look at Christmas time and how busy they are, it's not even close to the same thing.
Yeah. So how was 2020 for you? You were on the live stream a couple of weeks ago. You talked a little bit about the insurance settlement for the restaurant that had burned down and stuff. As of right now, you are divested of all your restaurant businesses, correct?
Yep.
And so you're still doing the contract work with the Economic Development Agency, helping new entrepreneurs get set up and started in the right direction. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? What kind of program is that?
Well, it's a training program for new entrepreneurs who are, they depending on their experience, they may have a lot of startup experience or none at all. And it just gives them a wide scope of different disciplines that they should be aware of that they may not have understood before. So what I tell some students or entrepreneurs coming into the group, because some of them are like, well, you know what? I've been working in the industry for 15 years. I don't really need to understand what it means to be in business. And the argument that I make for them is, well, I have 7 years of university in business administration and 20 years of working in the industry and 15 years of entrepreneurship now. But I can tell you, when I took the course back in 2006, it was groundbreaking. There was stuff I didn't realize. The things that you need to know in order to get in business for yourself. And I had a background in marketing and accounting, and there's some aspects of, just business entrepreneurship. Like, what does it mean? And for me, there were some redundancies there from my education and my experience, but there was enough good information that I could take away and apply it to the business that I was about to start.
Yeah. Well, this program, and it's not something that viewers can sign up to or anything like that. It's funded by a government initiative, and it's for people here in the local area. But back when I left American Express that I mentioned earlier here today, I knew when I left Amex, it was going to be to build my own consulting business to do work. And then appearing on YouTube just became a part of that as it unfolded. But I went through that course because it was a requirement to access a sort of a self-start benefit where they gave me a couple $100 a week for the first 30 or 40 weeks. I forget exactly what it was, to help me get up and running. And what I found to be very interesting was that the networking that you were able to do as a student there, because you had all these different guest speakers coming in from these different places, was quite neat. And one of the sources was a research office, and they changed their name a couple of times, like a lot of government agencies do.
Yep.
But I knew they existed and I knew what they did because of that course. And then just last week, I needed something from them. And I remember I reached out to you to find out who the current contact was. But without taking that program, I wouldn't have realized that that sort of resource was available for me. And just for everyone that's listening, I was working on a project for a client, for one of you guys, and I wanted a copy of an industry report that normally you have to pay thousands of dollars a year to subscribe to. And I knew that this government office had a subscription, and as a citizen, I could get them to run a report for me. So just knowing that existed allowed me to save some money. And that's one of the big advantages I've always found from being networked and finding out what resources are available locally. And one of the big traps I find with people, because I'm online, people who are interacting with me through YouTube and all this kind of stuff, they're online people too, is that sometimes it really pays to be unplugged and to actually create a network in your community, because there's all this stuff available that isn't necessarily easy to find online.
So that's a great point, Dave. So let me ask you this. Isn't it always a great thing to be unplugged a bit and to know that there are other resources? And I think of, the younger kids, my kids are still in their mid-teens, and I've seen this a lot, even in my consulting practice, is that people will go to the internet first for information, which is, it's normal and I get it because there's a fast amount of stuff out there. But sometimes just going to the internet doesn't mean that all businesses and all agencies have all information available online. And so I remember when I first got started, being unplugged from the internet and understanding what doors to go open was really important. Right? So isn't that still the case? Or does the internet kind of just wipe all that away?
No, I think it creates different opportunities for different skill sets. When I graduated from high school, I spent that summer between high school and university doing an entrepreneurship program, because I've always been interested in business. And I remember on the very first day, the very first lesson, because the whole point was to create a business plan over the course of the summer. The very first day, we each got a copy of the phone book. And the very first lesson was on how to get information. Now, that would have been 1993, the summer of 93. So the internet hadn't really blossomed or been accessible at that point. But we looked at the blue and green pages in the middle of the book. In the phone book here, there was the white pages. Blue and green were like government listings, and the yellow pages was the business advertisements. And we spent time looking at the phone book, because the person who was teaching, basically what he was saying is, this is the access to everything you'll ever need to know about everything. And he was teaching us how to navigate, how to call up businesses to get information. If your business plan was to make widgets, what goes into the widget? Now, who supplies you with the stuff that goes into the widget? Now, how do we talk to these people? And I would say that a lot of people today, if you would challenge them with calling up a supplier to have a conversation to get information for a business plan about the cost of different inputs, it would be a big challenge for some people. I know that, in my past relationship, my ex had teenagers, and they were very hesitant to talk to someone. It's almost a little bit of anxiety around doing something as simple as picking up the phone and talking to someone.
Well, and interesting, as you were talking about this, I was thinking about buying in businesses. You help people buy and sell businesses, and I've bought and sold businesses. And we all know there are businesses that are for sale online, whether it's, Business for Sale or Canada Business Network or Sunbelt or whatever brokerage you want to choose or whatever website you want to use. And you can go to, Craigslist or Kijiji, and you'll find opportunity, but it's not necessarily good opportunity. The best deals never actually hit the screen.
Yeah, it's true. And actually the guest that's coming on after you is someone who's going to be speaking to that directly, because he's working to find those deals that aren't on any of those screens.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so, okay, so you're working on the entrepreneurship program. Anything else lined up for 2021? What do you think is the big opportunity for this coming year?
My God, there's going to be some failures in 2021, and the question is if the failures line up to what the opportunity that I'm looking for. If they do, then we'll look at it. I'm not sure I want to get into an industry right now that is being pushed down by government regulation. When I think about the restaurant industry, they're at the whims of whatever the governments decide that they're going to do. That's what they'll do. I think there's going to be opportunity for sure, because in any time there's any event or anything that happens, there's opportunity in it. I'm not sure what that is yet. Buying a restaurant, maybe. If it's the right conditions and the right restaurant, maybe. I think there's going to be opportunity in liquidation. Looking at restaurants that are closing and equipment needs to be liquidated. I think there's going to be opportunity in the markets, in the financial markets. The markets are, if you listen to any of the pundits, they're saying that the markets are destined to crash in 2021. Whether that comes true or not, there's going to be opportunity in that volatility, and you have to decide, be financially aware of what's going on and then take advantage of whatever that may look like.
I think that 2021 is going to be very interesting because and it depends on which group of people you find yourself in, because obviously there's one group of people who have government jobs or they work in big companies or what have you that are probably pretty insulated from what happens. And then you've got the people who who are going to find themselves without an income, right? And so their point of view and what they're going to see as an opportunity or what they could do is going to be very different. And then there's the people who are prepared, right? Who like, well, yourself, for example, you've exited some businesses, you got an insurance settlement on one that burned down. So you're in a position where you can kind of wait for the right thing. What I'm looking out for when I'm out and about in the public are the people who are in that position where they need to get something going for themselves. And I'm looking to see what kind of creative things that start to come out of this, because people will always find a way to work themselves out of a problem. And I was reading an interesting article about a couple here in town that own a few food businesses. One's an outdoor beer garden type of business. They actually did better this summer than they did last summer. Another one of their businesses is a fine dining place that's really challenging. And their response to this whole thing was to open a pop-up business, a donut business, where they told everyone we're only going to be open for 2.5 months. You better get in here. And they were succeeded in creating a frenzy of activity. Everything I've heard is that they've done quite well with it. And I believe it's winding up here after New Year's. So to me, seeing how people can be creative with these different circumstances, it always impresses me how people think of new things.
Now, it's funny you talk about that pop-up donut shop, because I was in there a few weeks ago and talked to the owner. And I asked him if it was a temporary thing. And he said, we started it off as a temporary thing. And we're looking, because we have such high demand for our product right now, we're looking at maybe making it full-time. And I didn't know if that was a good idea or if he was just kind of talking off his hat and didn't really think about the strategy of it. But I don't know. Did you read that recently?
It was probably the beginning of this week.
Okay, so maybe they've changed their focus and decided to close it down. Because there's this honeymoon thing that happens with any new product. And maybe it's starting to wind down. That bell curve's going in the wrong direction. And January, February aren't a good time of year to be selling fattening donuts.
Well, there's a honeymoon period where people want to try the new thing. And then there's the scarcity FOMO thing of knowing something's not going to be available. And I believe that the producers on Broadway probably figured this one out 100 years ago, right? You create a big you create a lot of spin and publicity about the new show that everyone's going to run out to go to. And then you make a big show about how it's ending at a certain time. And if you haven't seen it, you better get out here. And then you take the product off the shelf and you put it away somewhere, and then maybe resurfaces again or resurfaces in a different way. Right.
It's not that much different than the toy industry at Christmas time. So they release a certain amount of product and they know it's, something that's going like crazy. I remember in my younger years, it was Tickle Me Elmo. So Tickle Me Elmo would fly off the shelves. People would beat each other up in the Walmarts to pick up a Tickle Me Elmo. But then there was a scarcity that there wasn't that many available. But all these children had asked for a Tickle Me Elmo at Christmas. So come January, when things got back to normal, the toy company would release all these Tickle Me Elmos. And it would increase the sales of the toy industry in January, which is typically a flat month. And because parents felt guilty that Junior didn't get his Tickle Me Elmo, so they go back out and buy it.
Well, some of us are smarter than that. One of the things that's going under the tree this year for my son is a personal check made out to him. But instead of an amount of money, it's got the name of a certain item that was not available. And I'm telling him, yeah, I'm getting it for you for Christmas. As soon as it's available in the store, we'll run out and pick it up.
Good for you.
I'm not going to be a sucker to that. Are you kidding? There's plenty of other stuff for him to play with until then.
Yeah, as if he doesn't have enough stuff to play with already.
Oh my God. Exactly. So then, you're just kind of sitting on the sidelines. You're just going to wait and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, I'm reading this really cool book right now by Nassim Taleb called The Black Swan. And
I've heard of it. Haven't read it yet. What have you read so far?
Well, I love it. I love it because it basically says that everything about probability matrices, although has some truth to them, that there are outlier events that don't fall within the bell curve. And when they don't fall within the bell curve, how do you explain them? Well, in most cases, they get explained over time because they fall within the bell curve. But in its immediacy, it doesn't. So when it comes to financial markets, something radically can happen that no one really understands why it happened. But in 9/11, when they talk about 9/11 is basically a black swan. And he says, we can now say from a narrative perspective why 9/11 happened. But do we really know? We're making the story up as we go because there are certain events that would have contributed to 9/11. But is there anything that we could have done to protect ourselves from 9/11? Maybe we could have put locks on the doors for the pilots, but no one really thought of it because it didn't seem to be that important. And
back in the 1990s, Boeing actually had a model of its airliner available that they were promoting to airlines where the pilots would have their own door. So the flight deck didn't connect with the passenger cabin at all. Mm-hmm. And they discontinued that offering because none of the airlines were taking it because, as you can imagine, it cost more.
That's right.
So, yeah, there are things that could have happened, but without believing that a situation like that was imminent or likely, people didn't want to spend the money for it.
Exactly. So anyways, he talks about this narrative effect and how we create the narrative in order to justify the event using causal narratives. And he says sometimes you don't even understand why it happened. Like, why did JFK get shot? Well, some people could say he got shot because he pissed off the mafia, and others could say there was members of his own government that didn't agree with his policies. Some will say, well, it was just a nut bar called Lee Harvey Oswald that was infiltrated with the Russians. Maybe he got shot because he got shot. Maybe he just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time and somebody was shooting a crow. Like, you don't know what the narrative basically starts creating a certain incidence. It was a black swan. We couldn't have predicted it really better than what happened. And so anyways, in looking at this stuff, it's like, okay, well, for me, I had a black swan. I was kind of predicting it, but for me, my black swan was somebody burned down my restaurant.
Yeah.
There were events that led up to it that I create the story around. But really, the person that burnt down my restaurant. Like, are they mentally deranged? Were they mad at me? Do they just want to burn things? Like, maybe there's video evidence to say the contrary. Maybe it was an accident, right? But all these things they just happen. And it's not about we can't predict them. So how do we react to it when it happens? And in all that, there's an opportunity and there are challenges, and you have to choose which side you're going to go down.
Well, I know that, coming out of this thing, and it was mentioned earlier today, but I think that the businesses that pull through this are going to be stronger, mm-hmm. and they're going to have more market share because some of the competitors are going to be gone. And the whole idea of securing, your family's future through the acquisition of a small, medium-sized business, I don't think that's ever going to change, because I don't think that big, giant companies are going to be able to deliver everything that people need and want. I don't think they ever will be able to. And there's always going to be a need for, or a desire to have things that small businesses are going to be the ones that are able to provide. And those needs and wants change over time, obviously, as technology and other things come and go in society. And so I think it's interesting. I feel really bad for people who are going to end up in a losing position. I've had a few of these people that I've talked with over the course of this past year. And the advice that I'm giving to everyone who finds themselves in one of these positions is when you realize that this thing is going to do you in, then you got to push through it with as much expediency as you can. So if that means, like declaring bankruptcy or going through any other kind of insolvency process to end up on the other side where you can start building up again, then that's where you have to go as quickly as possible. In my experience, the real negative outcomes come from people who end up stuck treading for a long time. Sorry, it's not COVID, I promise. Who are stuck treading for a long time, where they're not moving forward, they're not moving backwards. And with anything like, insolvency, bankruptcy, proposal, all these kind of different things that can happen, there's always this tail period where you're kind of in purgatory after, where you suffer under the fact that you went through this thing. That certain amount of time is a certain amount of time you're always going to have to go through it. So the faster you initiate, the sooner you're going to be out the other side. And that's, it's got to do with recognizing the reality of the situation that people are in.
Well, and I've seen this in my own personality in terms of emotion when I'm dealing with the markets. There's always this hope that things will turn around. There's always a hope that things will be better tomorrow. And in the restaurant business, we see that all the time. If January and February are tough, which are typically normal, there's hope that March and April will start to be better. And then there's hope that the summer will really bring in the money in order to pay for the bills for the entire year. And then there's hope that, you'll get your Christmas parties booked, and you'll get your all your Christmas revenues in to carry you through the next year.
Yeah.
But that hope doesn't always exist. And I've seen entrepreneurs in the mortgage industry and other industries that they always hope that tomorrow will be better, or they're the proverbial robbing Peter to pay Paul, and their cash flow sucks. And they're just like, well, no, we've got enough money to survive, but they're 60 days out on their payables. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Your business is terrible right now because you don't have enough money to pay the bills today and create a profitable situation tomorrow. And so there's just this hope that something's going to happen. This almost like this black swan is going to positively affect their business. But black swans are rare, right? And they're unpredictable. So in all of this, to your point, if things are going in the wrong direction, it's okay to hope. I believe strongly in hope, but not when it comes to my bank account.
Yeah.
If you're hoping for your bank account, go buy a lottery ticket. That's the best hope you'll ever get.
Jordan has just come into the studio. Jordan, are you ready to make your appearance? All right, here, I'm going to add him. Rick and I are just talking about the year ahead and about how unforeseen things can positively and negatively impact a business. Rick, to your point, I think that entrepreneurs have to be optimistic, and this is what I find is interesting, because there have been many times when I made videos and written articles or daily news, daily emails to people where I talk about the difference between entrepreneurs and investors, because I find that when I'm working with people that are trying to buy a business, not all of them necessarily are pure-blooded entrepreneurs. They're people who want to hedge their risk by buying something that's already functioning, already profitable, etc. Uh-huh. Jordan, you were the owner of a translation business, and then you went and bought another one. What label do you put on yourself? Are you more of an investor or more of an entrepreneur?
I don't know what I am. That's maybe the problem. No, I'd say very entrepreneurial, and I surround myself with mentors and coaches that point out the flaws in my optimistic rose, colored glasses for the future. And I think, Rick, I got to hear you say you can't take hope to the bank or something along those lines. You can't cash that check. So I do have some really good advisors around me that really challenge me to think about worst case and can you live with it? And so from that sense, I think of my investor muscle I've been working that out, especially as I look at acquisitions. It's like, what's worst case and how can I navigate that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's awesome. Tell us about what's been going on with you over the last year. I mean, you were looking at, you did one successful acquisition. You were looking at another one over the past year. How was your business affected by the lockdowns and everything to do with the pandemic?
Right. This year has 3 chapters, at least for our industry. It's a down year like anybody, unless you're manufacturing toilet paper. But the Q1 was best quarter ever in company history for the company I have and the newly acquired company, Q4 2019. And we thought this was going to be a banner year. And contrary, it's been the worst case forecast that I ran when I was thinking of buying this company. It's like, what does it look like in that scenario? And lo and behold, it's been a reality, but I already modeled it. So
you were already ready for it if it were to happen.
Yeah. And I forget what you asked me, but how's this year been with acquisition along those lines?
Well, how did the year go with you reacting to the pandemic and the rule changes and lockdowns and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, keyword reacting. Just nobody was ready for this. This was in nobody's business plan or even contingency plan, really. So best quarter ever, Q1. The sky is falling. Holy crap. How do we navigate this? Let's cut, pull back, renegotiate all of our contracts and expenses and office leases, and do it aggressively. Cut once and cut aggressive. And the next 3 months was kind of wait and see, recast the year, even worse than my worst case forecast, and make plans for that. But then we flipped, turned a corner in Q3. I think we kind of stabilized. Our industry did. We provide language services. So we went from translating the public health announcements before COVID to COVID public safety notices. So
right.
In that sense, our industry was quite resilient. We're still down, and it's the worst case scenario, but we're flipping to a growth mode from a crisis mode now at the end of this year.
And so, you talk about public health notices. A good number of your clients are government agencies, right? But even with that kind of client base, you still suffered a downturn.
Yeah, the world shut down. People weren't going outside. Unprecedented.
Now, I remember talking with you back in January because you were traveling often to the Seattle area and you had just come back from a vacation in northern Italy, and then you worried, oh my God, did I have that? Did you ever find out if you did or not? Yeah,
I did. So the story goes, we have an office north of Seattle, and I was traveling there in January. By February, I was really sick, really sick, and thought I had recovered. So I went to Rome, Italy, beginning of March, and then had kind of a relapse when I came back. They treated me for pneumonia in early March, and then I recovered in March. So it was like 4 to 6 weeks of this, like the worst I've ever been sick. And I thought it was just because I was going hard. We had acquired the company and I was traveling and all the newness of expanding our business. But at that time they didn't have these COVID tests. So I had to wait, I think, another 2 months before I could get an antibody test. And that confirmed that I had it. And I spoke with my physician.
It was COVID that you had
Yeah.
contracted. Wow.
Yeah. In that time, I talked to the physician too that treated me for pneumonia. He said, "Oh my gosh, all the symptoms, everything. I wish I could have tested you then. They weren't available."
Wow. And well, I'm glad that you recovered well, obviously.
Yeah. I don't know if they've conclusively said you can't get it again, like if you developed immunity, but so far, we're healthy and well over here.
Good. And so your plan is to continue to expand. You're in the Business Buyer Adventure program. Your plan is to acquire and expand. You were working on another deal this year. What has this put any kind of change into your plans, or are you still full steam ahead to try to find new targets as you move forward?
So it's still, the entrepreneur of me is still moving forward and talking to prospective opportunities and taking into account, we're in an interesting time, probably one of the worst economic times that I've seen in my lifetime. It's going to be worse than 2008, 2009, unfortunately. But yeah, it's still going forward. You got to still do the dating. It really is on the small business front. It's like adopting a child more so than it is buying a house. And so if anybody's looking to retire or exit, especially after this year, I will definitely talk to them and invest that time with them. And I have a pretty tight process now, but the part that you can't answer from the numbers is the chemistry of the seller and their culture, their people. And I look for really good client accounts. So that's what I'm looking for. We're trying to grow and add new accounts, and acquisition is a good way to do it in our industry. So we'll continue looking for good fit acquisitions going forward, even though there's new uncertainty in the new post-COVID economy.
Well, and do you think that what has happened this year is going to make some of these sellers who've decided to exit, is going to make things easier or harder for you as far as, showing them what the deal needs to look like? Because obviously if a business is having a downturn, it's going to be harder to get a bank on board or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm not a Sam Zell. They call him the grave dancer, where he waits till things are kaput and then comes along. For these deals, it's their retirement. The sellers are wanting to get as much squeeze from it, and there is a calibration of reality and what you can expect to get from your business. If people want more from squeeze from that, generally taking the terms and adjusting them over a longer period of time, where we kind of share in some of the risk, or the seller becoming more of a bank and having that component. Those are just different terms that we could do to help get them more squeeze. But if their expectation from the get-go on the price is just so out of touch, I still talk to them and try and share my experience. Here's what I've seen them transact at, and not be the bad guy that says, heck no, this is what it is, and go along the way. It just, I think, David, you've coached me on this too. It's like, we'll see you later after you've talked to 2 or 3 other people, and they've beat you down on what the market will pay. And then maybe they remember us. We had this great chat over coffee, or now over Zoom. And I liked this guy, and I'm willing to do a deal that's closer to reality.
Well, it's, the trouble with a take it or leave it, tough sort of negotiation angle is that it's not like buying some kind of object where you make a transaction and you walk away with the object. When you buy a business, you need the investment and the ongoing engagement of the seller, because they have to help you transition that business over. And so if you need their help after the transaction, then they need to be willing to do that. Earlier today, we had Adam Purcell on, and he was talking about how he sold his business and he's still meeting with the buyer almost weekly, talking with them about their growth plans and everything, and giving his feedback based on when he was the operator of the business. And so that clearly is an example of a strong relationship. And that's what a buyer wants to be buying into when they acquire something that's already going. The fact that someone is around who knows what it's like and who can provide some insight into things that might come up because of their experience. Yeah. That's great, Jordan. Thank you for sharing that with us. And what about for Christmas? You guys are, you're in California, so you guys are probably just sticking close to home, are you?
Yeah, we are. No skiing, no snow, just some beach walks. I don't have any children, so it's just the dog and my wife and I. And she has her business. She's a doctor and has a clinic. So the companies and businesses are kind of like our children right now, for better or for worse. Somebody said, don't love something that is inanimate because it can't love you back. So I don't know if I should love the business or the company as a child, but
it must be stressful for her. Obviously, she's just seeing patients all the time. With the worry about contracting this thing. Did she go through it with you at the same time you had it?
No, actually, she never got it, and she took a lot of precautions. I was sleeping on the couch, and hand sanitizer, just really separate bathrooms. But yeah, as a medical practitioner, she takes a lot of precautions. She is seeing more of the general public, so we're not really seeing anybody, just to space everything out. We'll see you next year.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense.
I want to chime in. Is that okay, Dave?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Jordan, I've got a thought about this. You shouldn't love a business because it's an inanimate object and it can't love you back.
Yeah.
And as you said, I was like, oh, that's interesting. I never really thought about that. I mean, obviously I can't love this Sharpie because it is just a Sharpie and it's a tool that I use. And a business, to some extent, if it's an incorporated business, it is an inanimate object. But really, when you think about the definition of the business, isn't it just a bunch of buyers and sellers and things that are services that are going out and about? And I think if I think about that from a marketing perspective, if you're trying to find new leads or new opportunities, you're trying to create connections. And I think you're very good at that based on what you've told me about some of your situations where you're buying in. And so if you're looking at the connection, well, now you're dealing with people, and love is a part of connection and part of passion and part of people. So I think it's very, very safe to say if you love your business, that means you're passionate about it, because those connections with your customers, and if you have employees, those people that are working for you are really important because they will love you back.
Business is done amongst people. It's true. I do love the fine line Sharpies.
I do like a good Sharpie too. But interesting thought, Rick. I think there's a lot of, as a service business, we're only as good as the people doing the work. And this year, I don't love the doing of the work. I love what the company provides, the outcomes that, I get to be an employer and create a great place for people. And, we navigated the storm together, and there's a job on the other side. And, the fact, I bought Language Network for my parents and allowed them to exit, and now I get to carry on their legacy. So I'm enjoying all the benefits and outcomes that business provides. And I get to meet great people, like you were saying, that just, especially prospective sellers, getting to learn their story and just being curious about it. especially at this level, the investor side, right? You know, all the zeros and ones and commas and everything needs to balance and make sense there. But the human side, I think there could definitely be some love. And so I agree with you in that aspect.
I've always thought of businesses and entrepreneurship as a creative endeavor, like a orchestra playing a piece of music, or like a ballet performance, something like that, where you are creating a format for these people to be doing stuff with each other in order to have a certain outcome. And, you know, to me, the business is a system about how all these different, the people, the place, and the capital interact with each other to create that cash flow. You know, and so if the ballet director is looking for the standing ovation, you know, the entrepreneur is looking for the positive cash flow as the net result of everything working together properly. And when we have hiccups and problems in the business that create failures along the way, then we may not get that positive cash flow. Just like if a ballerina, you know, trips on stage, you know, and the performance is not what it's supposed to be, they might not get that standing ovation. I've always seen that analogy in looking at business, because and then it relates so well to the whole idea of buying a business, because then you don't have to start with a blank piece of paper like someone might if they were creating a whole new ballet from scratch. You know, they perform the Nutcracker, I'm sure, in normal years at thousands of places around the world. You know, students all over the place are doing this. It's a regular Christmas thing. It's easy because you can just take it and you already know what the different roles are, versus starting something with a blank sheet of paper. Yeah. So we're at the end. Incredibly, it's been 2.5 hours. I want to thank you guys for joining me here today. It's been a lot of fun. I want to remind everyone who's been watching, if you enjoyed it, hit the thumbs up button. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm. I'd love to hear from you and wish you a Merry Christmas. If anyone wants to wish me a Merry Christmas, just do it down in the comments, because that also helps with the YouTube algorithm. And for those people who have just started watching the channel over the last year, I'll remind people again, there's playlists where you can consume all the older content in a format that's streamlined according to topic, which could be helpful for a lot of you guys. And if you're interested in hearing real conversations about people trying to buy, sell, or better manage a business, the holiday chat recordings come out starting tomorrow. And in order to receive them, you have to be on the email list. So just head on over to davidcbarnettlist.com to sign up for that. Or just go to the blog site, davidcbarnett.com. On the left-hand side is a place to sign up for the email list. And guys, thanks so much. A Merry Christmas, and I hope Santa Claus finds you sometime later tonight, and that he washes and probably properly sanitizes before he enters your homes.
Perfect, Dave. I don't know if I should leave you with the last word, or if I can say something before I take off.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you like to say?
Well, for your viewers, one of the things that I tell some people who are thinking about starting businesses, the best time to start a business was yesterday. The second best time is today, and the third best time is tomorrow. So never forget that.
Very good, wise words. May I add an outro comment?
Yeah.
So I will second that it can be a lonely journey, and if you have an entrepreneurial streak, growth through acquisition is a good way to do it, and buying a company and carrying on the legacy. But get yourself a coach, get yourself a team around you. I've worked with David for almost 3 years, 2.5 years.
It's been a while,
yeah. And I will continue to. I just wouldn't be here without that mentorship and support. So my second to 2021 growth and being an entrepreneur is get after it, but also get some good coaching and mentorship.
Yeah. If anyone's watching and they're thinking that buying a business might be for them in 2021, if you haven't already, go over to businessbuyeradvantage.com. That's where the process is laid out. But the initial online course It's like over 12 hours of material now. It takes you through the whole process, and then there's additional modules I've added over the course of time, and I've talked about it ad infinitum across different YouTube channels. But there is a special. There's some bonuses in there until tomorrow, Christmas Day. So if you were on the fence out there, it makes sense to move forward today. One of the bonuses is a private Q&A with me and the other people who signed up in December. We're going to be doing that on Monday, and so you need to buy it by tomorrow if you want to get that extra bonus. And then people who do the course, there are people who've done the course who've gone out and they bought a business, and then other people want a little more help on an ongoing basis, like Jordan, and they'll join the Business Buyer Adventure group coaching program. We get together 3 times a month. We share stuff in a Facebook group. We have guest speakers that come in the form of expert calls, and it really provides that ongoing push to go out and do the work, because finding a good business to buy means oftentimes finding it before those people get out in front of a bunch of other buyers. And I know, Jordan, that's something that you do a lot of work with, and it's something we talk about in the group. And the people who have the greatest degree of success are the ones that get that deal flow going. And it amazes me, earlier this year, Peter was another guy in the group who did a deal, and he bought a business that would never have been on his radar, except it appeared after he started to do the work of doing the networking and reaching out to businesses. And he got referred to the business that he ended up buying as a person who could be a good manager. They were looking for a manager. They weren't looking to sell. And when Peter ended up meeting with them and talking with them, he said, I don't think I'd want to be your manager, but would you look at selling? And they ended up at the end of the day doing a deal. And it was all a fruit eventually that came from that exercise of doing the work to find a business that fit a certain criteria. And so, yeah, it's certainly not easy. And my goal is just to help people along to make sure that they're doing the right things and they avoid traps. Awesome. Well, Merry Christmas, guys.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
And thanks for joining, and thanks to all the guests that were on earlier today. And I hope everyone that's watching live or watching during replay had a good time. Please hit like, and we'll see you.
Dave just froze.
It's a good way to go out.
Absolutely.
We made it to 2.5 hours, so
Yeah, and he was at the end. He was saying his closing comments.
I guess we have the last word.
Go for it, Jordan.
Thank you, everybody, and have a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We got a lot of work to do, so rest up. Hi, Rick.
Bye. Oh, I exit.